You have two eyes, huh? Do you understand the game a bit? Yeah, have a look.
I'm not saying anything to you in particular because I know you're not too accurate with your reporting.
That's what you paid
so you're
for.
Saying I should resign. So you're saying I should resign?
I think
that's
you should,
your opinion. Is that right?
That's my
opinion.
Fine. Are you going to resign then?
No, of course I'm not going to resign.
I simplify things next time.
Yes, hello, welcome to the national curriculum for another week. It's been a big week in Australian football. It's always a big week in Australian football, but that means a big week we need to bring out the big guns. And that definitely doesn't mean Vince Regari, who likes ticker and has decided not to come on this week. I think I saw something about red wine to drink or something like about that. But we've gone out and we've replaced him anyway with the much better Sydney-based journo, Teo Pellizzeri. You're here. How you going, mate?
Temporarily based in Sydney, potentially forever. But delighted to be on, fellas. As you say, massive week. We've got so much to cover off. I mean, everyone's buzzing out of the weekend of NPL and Australia Cup, and we've got a team in a World Cup at the moment too. It's really all happening.
And, well, the next panellist, originally from New South Wales, but she was so good, we here in Victoria decided to steal her away. Anyway, Taryn Heddo, thanks for coming back on. A lot to talk about, obviously, in the women's game. How you going?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. Pleasure to be here as always. Just gotta be better than those Sydney-based journos. So happy to be here.
And then, of course, as ever, Nick DeBarno. Nick, have you been in an AFL game today, or are we getting you actually fresh and full of football?
No. Well, not full of football because I've had the whole day driving to and fro from the airport. So no, not really. It's been a busy day. So I actually haven't seen all of it live in the action. So I was doing a quick catch up for the 40 minutes before the podcast. But no footy today, other than the fact that watching it from home. So yeah, other than that, all good. We're ready to go.
Are you driving to the airport?
I was picking
up condition of a bumble date or something?
Oh, for God's sake. No, I was picking up my grandparents from the airport, actually, Joey. They've been in Cairns for the past fortnight. I was being a good grandson. So, no, I was not. It was not part of a date. So, and as I said, the joke needs to die. So, I'm not even going to entertain it anymore.
Oh, well, you hear that, ladies? Nick DeBarno loves his family. He's very nice to his grandparents. That sounds like a catch to me. But we can move on, and we will immediately move into the first item on the agenda. Apologies to anybody that can hear my girlfriend yelling at our Google device that lives in the kitchen. But we have a World Cup on. We have a team in the Under-20 World Cup, the Young Matildas. Win and a loss. And well, they got a 3-1 win against Costa Rica in their first fixture, coming from behind. I mean, Costa Rica taking the lead with an absolute worldie of a free kick, but then the Young Matildas coming back. But then not so good in the second game. In monsoonal conditions, Brazil scoring a goal in either half and the Young Tillies going down. And really now with it all to play for against the Spanish after their 5-0 win over Costa Rica, a draw will not be enough. It almost certainly will for the Young Matildas in their next game. They'll need to go out and beat Spain. But I'll go to you first, Taryn, because I know you were up because I saw you tweeting about how you could have had a lie-in given the rain delay. But what have you made of... Well, I'll ask you first. What did you make of the Young Matildas against Costa Rica? And what were your takeaways from that game?
Yeah, the game against Costa Rica, I think for vibes reasons, it was great. It was great to get the win. It was a great confidence builder for them to have the opportunity to play in front of over 22,000 very loud and raucous Costa Rican fans. I think is that sort of experience for many of them, probably all of them. That's the first time they've had that sort of experience. So that's good. Obviously, to respond to going behind, to come back and to win, also good. It was the sort of game where 11v11 we should have won, and I'm glad that we did. Player to player, we were the better team. We looked very shaky to start with, though, and I think a lot of that probably was to do with the crowd, probably was to do with a bit of nerves. There was just a lot of misplaced passes, a lot going wrong, and then sort of once that sort of wonder goal did go in, I think it sort of kicked them into gear. They got a bit more comfortable with the environment, started playing, and got the result. There was some, I guess, warning signs for what was going to happen against Brazil in that game. So the 3 goals, I think it was a penalty, a corner, and a goal off it was a break, but a keeper's mistake at the end caused the second goal. So, I guess that was warning sign number 1. And warning sign number 2 was, I guess, with the very, very notable exception of Abby Lemon, who came on as a late sub in both games, a sort of lack of willingness to run at players, and the beginnings of the U shape that we would see more prominently against Brazil. So it was great that they got that win, and I think it's really fantastic, just the fact that we don't often have a team in this tournament. We haven't since 2006. Not sure that we got a win in that tournament. Well, we certainly didn't make the knockouts since 2004. So great that we got the win, got off to a good start, but yes, there were some warning signs in that game to come.
Well, I mean, when you are looking at Costa Rica result, on the one hand, a win at a World Cup, Australian youth development is fixed, it's saved, win at the World Cup. Teo, moving aside the Young Matildas for a second, what did you make of the Costa Ricans in that game?
I thought that a number of them were technically questionable. There were a lot of errant first touches in that game. And look, credit to the crowd. I don't know what sort of crowd they got for the Spain game today, but they lost 5-0, which means that the Matildas now can't advance with a draw against Spain. We would have to beat them. So I think that Costa Rica, we're a beatable team, which we did win against. I think Taryn's made some excellent points about some of the warning signs that were there. But by the same token, and I think this also applies to the experiences that we've had at some AFF championships in the past, we might have seen the under-23s go to Thailand and to Philippines, and the crowds weren't fantastic. They were, 4,000 to 5,000. They weren't 20,000 plus. I think of the young Matildas going to the AFF to play senior opponents in Myanmar in 2016, and we're talking 25,000 people. And even though many of those players who were in the young Matildas at the time have not kicked on to senior Matildas, many of them aren't even A-League women's players anymore, and they're kind of still in the NPL. That experience alone is, one, the greatest selling point that football has against the other sports in the Code War when you're battling for young, talented athletes who can do it all. And two, I think that it is invaluable for those players that do go on to play in high-pressure situations later in their careers. Women's club football in Europe is going to significantly improve the exposure to those crowds. But previously, things like that are more or less all we had. And I think that everyone who was playing or there for that game against Costa Rica is probably going to remember it for the rest of their careers and the rest of their lives. And for many of them, it's going to be the biggest crowd they play against, potentially until they move to Europe or they play for the senior Matildas.
Well, moving on, we did have another game that took place in the wee hours of this morning, a 6 a.m. kickoff, although if you had a lie-in, you would have caught the end because we had a rather lengthy rain delay. Rain and hail and other nasty pieces of weather. It came in the 27th minute of the contest, which unfortunately for the young Matildas, they'd actually gone down in the 26th minute. The Brazilians taking the lead through Priscilla and then scoring 1 minute into the second half. And that was all the Brazilians really needed. Although if you had watched this game, the 2-0 scoreline, correct me if you have a different opinion, anyone, but it could have been a lot worse, that scoreline for the young Matildas. I mean, watching the game is one thing, but you can just even look at the stat sheet. Now, the young Matildas did have 56% of possession, but speaking to that U formation that you referenced, Taryn, with that 56% of possession, the young Matildas were able to produce one shot from a free kick that didn't really test the Brazilian keeper. Conversely, with their 44% of the ball, admittedly, a lot of it was stat padding with long efforts outside the box, but the Brazilians created 27 shots on goal, 8 of them on target. So for all the maybe positives that could be taken out of the first game against the Costa Ricans, when you're coming up against much stronger opposition in the forms of Brazil. I'm not sure how many of our viewers are aware, but the Brazilians went through qualifying at the South American Championships undefeated and didn't concede a single goal in qualification. We saw the limitations of our team, but Taranteo, Nick DeBarno, who wants to go first? What were your takeaways from that game?
I'll keep my bit very short and sweet in terms of the possession stat, Joey. Like, isn't that just arguably one of the most alarming bits about the stat line? If you're looking beyond just the score sheet, even for anyone who probably didn't watch the game, and you see a team that's 55% of the ball and has one shot and concedes 27 shots. I know, as you mentioned, a lot of them were stats padded shots from range, but isn't this just becoming a bit of a common thread amongst not only our national teams in men's and women's, but also we've joked about it in the A-League as well down here about teams who have more of the ball tend to not win games. And it's just like, I'm not even surprised anymore. Like that this just keeps happening, that, you know, our teams, our national teams, our club sides just don't know what to do and don't know how to function in possession. And I think if you're conceding 27 shots and only creating one with having more of the ball, for me, the alarm bells have to be ringing. And I don't know if anything's really going to change for that Spain game. If not, it might get worse. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, that really sort of jumped off the page to me this morning.
Yeah, I mean, Aussie DNA is clearly made of like little U shapes or something. It is a really consistent theme. You know, I actually, you know, in the first sort of 10 minutes, I was watching this game at 6 a.m. and I sort of thought, oh, you know what, we're playing better. Like this is encouraging. We're stringing passes together. You know, we seem to be more aware of what we're doing. You know, Brazil are clearly much better than Costa Rica. But, you know, great, we're stringing passes together. Something could happen. We're playing more through the midfield, which I think is something that we didn't do as much against Costa Rica. Great. Good signs. And then it sort of gets to that rain delay and we haven't had a shot. And then it gets to halftime and we haven't had a shot. And you're kind of like, okay, this really flattered to deceive here. And I think it's, you know, a lot of this, you know, the big giant asterisk is that Brazil are obviously a very, very high quality opposition, as Joey said. I actually had a quick squiz at the Wikipedia of the South American under-20 championships as well. They've won every single time. So when we say, oh, our group has the European championships and the South American championships, I mean, saying that Brazil are the South American championships actually completely goes without saying. And I'm sure that if there was a national curriculum equivalent in Brazil that spoke about women's football at all, there would be a lot of angst about where those generations of talents go, because they win. They've won every single South American under 20.
To be fair to them now, Taryn, quite a few of their players are now already based in Europe. Contracts in Spain. They're making their move. I think they're sniffing the breeze too. But you make an excellent point. It's a bit like North Korea's dominance of women's football at youth level. How come that hasn't translated to the senior team? Oh, wait.
I wonder.
There are slightly more cynical reasons for that. Whereas, but isn't that, as a credit to Brazil, but that's an indictment on a country like Argentina. That's a country on an indictment on a country like Uruguay. It's probably cultural, right? I can't speak from any great point of knowledge. But how can football-crazed, fanatical nations not even put up a fight to Brazil to the point where they can score a goal against them in under-20 women's qualifying? I mean, I think on one hand it's the quality of Brazil, and on the other hand it's the other nations not holding up their end of the bargain.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure there's probably for another podcast, but South American women's football, yes, could be better.
So here's my query about, not so much about the game, but about our ability to analyse the tournament. We played 2 friendlies against New Zealand in Canberra. They were both streamed by the FFA. Due to COVID, Leah Blaney, the coach, had to massively uphaul the team and bring in ring-ins at the last minute for the first of the 2 games. And that's how Janea Dos Santos got her name effectively on the radar and onto the plane for this tournament as one of the backup strikers. But then they went over to New Zealand and they played 2 matches, one of which we found out the score, The other one, I only found out the score by digging and using my contact network. No footage ever appeared. Neither of them was streamed. People were, only a small number of people, admittedly, were dissatisfied with that. And then we've played a bunch of lead-up games to this tournament. Now, one thing that we are going to be discussing all through A-League season and all through the European club season for the next couple of months until the World Cup is who we pick. And it's great to go and analyse what happens at these tournaments. But we as a nation, when we talk about football culture, when we talk about being a football nation, when we talk about serious football nation things that we don't do, being able to discuss who we pick for these tournaments is the big glaring gap. The horse has already bolted on who we took. I look at our squad that we ended up taking, right? I see on Wikipedia, whoever's running the Wikipedia, credit to you for putting the data in, but they have named right back Cush LaRue and midfielder turned right back Charlize Rule as forwards in our squad. I mean, I feel as though, let me run through the forwards that have either been called up to camps or have played for the Young Matildas in games, whether it was the Zero Dark 30 operation in New Zealand or whether it was the games we actually got to see in Australia. Ellen Gett, Kate Godden, Alani Anchevsky, Caitlin Carriage, Aideen Keane, who has since done her ACL, sadly, Sienna Saveska, who then went away with the AFF with Ray Dower's team because she's young enough, Holly Furphy, and Amelia Murray. Those are the players we looked at, but we, the media, didn't get to look at them, at least not playing for the Young Matildas, because we don't go to the training sessions. Our employers aren't going to pay us to go. I mean, I was thinking about going and I thought, no, I'd rather work today. As much as I would love to go, we didn't get to see the games in New Zealand. We didn't get to see any of the warm-up games. When we talk about legacy for the Women's World Cup in 2023, how about when our national teams play, we can watch them? It's as simple as that. Let us, the media, into the tent, not to say, yes, Queen Slay, when good stuff happens, but to actually talk about the team in an analytical fashion and not just criticism, just analysis. That's all we ask. And, I feel as though Leah Blaney looked under every stone and turned over every rock. And at the end of the day, we ended up starting Briley Henry, who scored one goal from a penalty kick in A-League women's season and hasn't scored from open play since, I think, the end of the season before at A-League women's level. So, I mean, how can we make our minds up when what we get is the games and we don't see behind the scenes? I don't like the idea of just take our word for it. And shows like this wouldn't exist if take our word for it was our national strategy. That's what I have to say about the Brazil game. Not much about the Brazil game there, admittedly, but that's what I'd like to see going forward. Let the legacy of the World Cup be that when our national teams play, we can watch them. And that comes back, Joey, to something you and I got a little bit of an insight to when we caught up the week before last in Melbourne about why we couldn't watch the AFF unless we were able to get a dodgy stream, or why Ray Dower's team, who went and won the AFF, which is a massive credit to Ray and how they've run the program all through COVID to identify players with NPLs getting cancelled. I think credit to someone like an Eric Subiano who was able to find streams and find info and dig it up. But, man, wouldn't it just be nice if we could just watch our national teams when we play?
Basically, yeah, it would have been 15 grand per game for streams.
That's what we're hearing.
AFF.
Yeah.
So basically, if take the AFF that Ray Dower's side won, you go through the group stages and get through the finals, you're looking at an outlay of 100 grand to simply put on an internet stream of that, which, as was pointed out, that's another camp for that team. So it's ways and balance. It wasn't 15K for the entire tournament. It was 15K per game. But on the subject of selection...
We sell ourselves short in our analysis and our ability to contribute to the discussion and help the people who want answers when we can't get the full picture.
Well, we touched on selection, and there was one topic I wanted to bring up. Was pointed out that the starting 11 against the Costa Ricans, and there was a bit of discourse about it. Every single member of the starting 11 plays in New South Wales NPL. Teo, you call New South Wales NPO. Is, in fact, the best young women under the age of 20 in the entire country. Are they all localised within 50k of the Sydney CBD?
Mate, they're all localised within 15k of Lane Cove and Manly. What are you talking about? I mean, this is haven't you listened to some of the other analysis out there this week? New South Wales is just better at everything, mate. Get on their level.
Okay. I will say, and I
That was,
watch.
for anyone listening to the podcast, I was being slightly tongue in cheek there. Don't go and aggregate that.
No. But like, listen, I watch the NPL women quite a bit in Victoria, and I'm not going to argue that the New South Wales NPLW is the superior competition. It's why.
To be fair, Joey, it is, and it is by miles. No disrespect.
Yeah, so I'm not going to argue that. I think you were talking about legacy before, Teo. My question is, are we satisfied with that? Are we basically satisfied with saying that we've got this giant big country, but we're content with a situation where the only league where we're actually going to properly develop players and bring them through is just one competition based out of one city? How many young players are we missing? Because, I mean, especially, I'll get to you in a second, Taylor, but especially when you consider that these are young players, there's under 20s, under 16s, under 17s. A lot of the time, it's not as easy for them to just up sticks and move around the country like it is for grown-ass women. So how many players are we missing out on because we aren't like, surely a legacy item should be not, do we just give the other leagues participation trophies and call players up from them for shits and giggles? How do we bring the rest of the country up to New South Wales and NPL New South Wales level? I mean, it should actually be incumbent on Football Australia as a legacy item of the Women's World Cup to do that because, you know, unlike the A-League women's anymore, they actually do control the NPLs.
Well, so
is there a remit?
Antonis in the comments says, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't South Australia's Ella Tompkins start? Yes, she did, but she plays for the Northern Tigers in the New South Wales NPL. Same with Hannah Lowry from Western Australia, having moved to Sydney and playing for Blacktown City. Taryn, as I hand Joey's point over to you with my little contribution on the way through, Joey, I think the answer is A-League women's clubs, the season getting longer, the pay and conditions and ability to turn full-time professional getting more viable will mean that A-League women's clubs and training environments will become the full-time football commitment of players, as opposed to the NPLWs, which have to do the heavy lifting for the majority of games and the majority of the season. Eventually, the balance is going to tip. The season's going to be so long that even NPL clubs might start wondering, hang on, do we really want to sign players in the A-League women's? Because we won't have them for finals. We won't have them for the start of the season. Essentially, what we're doing is we're now the babysitters, but only for 8 games or 6 weeks instead of 22 weeks or 26 weeks. Taryn, you were thrilled to see a Victorian named captain, at least late in the game. But, I mean, it's a valid point. Look, you know, I'm a very parochial Victorian, and even I will admit the New South Wales NPLW is a sensational league. There are games which at times are as good a standard, you know, at least aesthetically to the untrained eye or the trained eye, as some of your less impressive A-League women's games, or even average A-League women's games. But that's because often you'll see RPA Leichhardt roll out with 11 A-League women's listed players, Northern Tigers with 7 or 8 or 9, and a couple of them Kiwi internationals. So it stands to reason that, you know, that's where you would do a lot of your scouting. But Taryn, what are your thoughts on Joey's point?
I do agree. More funding for the Yarra Jets specifically is the answer to all of our depth problems. Look, it drives me up the wall because, you know, growing up, like I didn't play a high level of football, but I played a high level of cricket, and I grew up on the Central Coast. And the way that the system worked was essentially so because I was on the Central Coast, I was in the country region. So I was in, now I just feel like I'm bragging about my cricket career. Anyway, I was in. But
hang on, that's the whole point. That's the whole point of being a cricketer, Taryn. War stories about the gritty 30 you made in a loss. Everyone was shattered. Everyone was shattered, but you were happy because you upped your average. That's how cricket works.
I thought, according to that Twitter account I've seen, it's about making your dad love you or something like that.
The great
it's the only way. But, you know, so I grew up in the Central Coast, so I played. So I was like part of this like country reps thing. So every month or so we'd go away on like a weekend like training camp with Central Coast and Newcastle. Every sort of 3 months there'd be a big like New South Wales camp. There'd be actually probably even more frequently than that, there was like a big squad of like all across New South Wales of sort of 30 in like whatever age group for New South Wales you're in. So there was 30, under 15s or whatever. You'd train throughout the season. Then it would narrow down, but there'd be, countless amount of stuff, all free. If you made these squads, you were in, you would get the coaching, you would get the, you'd have these opportunities, and it didn't matter where you were in New South Wales. There was a sort of a system for you, a country system for you. Obviously not 100% perfect. You were still expected, more or less expected, when you became an adult to play in the Sydney grade competition. But as a teenager and in high school, it didn't matter if you didn't live in Sydney. It didn't matter if you weren't playing in that competition. You had opportunities throughout, and it didn't cost you anything, and it was fine. You'd pay your club fees and your kit, and that was pretty much it. And, having sort of, now looking at this way that we develop footballers in this country, and it's like, it's so obvious, but it drives me up the wall that anyone can think that it is a positive thing that we are locking so many kids out of our system. You'd want to hope that the next martyr or something isn't living in, somewhere that's not within 15 kilometers of Lane Cove. Or if she is living somewhere that's not within 15 kilometers of Lane Cove, you'd want to hope her family has money. It's a nonsense. It's anyway, I guess that's obviously a complete and utter frustration, and one of the ways in which we completely fail our kids coming through. I guess going way back to the point, how can we analyze this tournament? That's why I don't necessarily think it's helpful to analyze individual players, because I think that we don't have the cattle. No, we do have a very talented group of players coming through the system. How are they being used? Why is Charlie Rule playing as a forward? She's a good player. That's bizarre. So it's
well, but hey, Taryn, that comes back to, why is Courtney Vine used as a right wing back, which she never plays at any club level, but only when she gets to the Matildas. And a point I made back in A-League women's season: why does Tony Gustafsson trust Courtney Nevin at centre back at international level when Jeff Hopkins doesn't think he can get 3 points with her at Melbourne Victory at centre back?
Yeah. So there's all of these deeper issues with who is even getting to the point of being selected. So that's issue number one. But then when we just look at this tournament, the meaningful thing that we can get out of this specific tournament is, how are these players who, have asterisk question mark, have been selected, how are they being used? Because they're talented players. We have a talented group of players who are very good. There was one, I made a tweet just so I could quote it on the podcast. There was a moment where Sarah Hunters...
That is putting yourself over in the true spirit of TNC.
Honestly, where Sarah Hunter's gotten the ball, sort of, we're 2-0 down. There's about 20 minutes to go. She's gotten the ball. She's dribbled past one player, dribbled past two, sort of spun around, like done this really fantastic piece of skill, and then passes backwards, and then it goes around the U. And I was just like, this is such a perfect encapsulation of everything, because Sarah Hunter is a fantastic player, but in this system, she's being used in this completely bizarre way where we're not seeing her ability and her talent. And so, yes, that was everything I was thinking while Teo was going on his rant. Basically, yes, there are so many deeper problems. It is obviously a problem that we have an 11 selected from New South Wales NPL because of access issues, because of who is being seen, so many other issues. But the meaningful sort of the meaningful analysis of this tournament has to focus on the systems and the way that the players are being used, as opposed to the players themselves, because we can't make that judgment because of all of those other intangibles.
And I worry that some people, fans, media, fans with keyboards that are in the grey area, whatever, they will fall into the trap of thinking, because you went to this tournament, because you are now a capped under-20 World Cup player, that therefore, within the stratified system of the Matildas hierarchy, you must therefore permanently or always be ahead in the pecking order of someone who did not, regardless of whether they were injured, regardless of whether they had long COVID, regardless of whether they were out of form in the NPL, regardless of whether they weren't a good personality fit at this point in their maturity to go to a youth tournament. And that's one of the things that really worries me about this, that it's just going to further indent the perceived hierarchy of who's next. And speaking of who's next, I'm going to contradict myself entirely by saying, how good is Kirsty Fenton? And she needs to be in the squad for the Canada series. And this is a player, this is my last point on the under-20s Matildas. This is a player who had struggled hard at the start of the NPLW season with Northwest Sydney Spirit. They were hanging around the bottom of the league. They were getting badly beaten. And this is a team with Nat Tobin, the Sydney captain, and Sophie Harding and Lucy Johnson from Newcastle. So, like, no shortage of A-League women's players, but they were struggling. And I don't think she was playing particularly well. But she's raised her game on the big stage. And these are the ebbs and flows of young players. It happens to all of them. And when you're not in a full-time professional environment, it's going to keep happening to them into their early 20s. But I think it's similar to the form she was in before COVID ripped up the A-League women's season. Strike while the iron is hot. She's now played at left back for Newcastle, at centre back for her NPL team, and at right back for the Young Matildas. And I think as a fullback on either side of the pitch, she's been sensational. So I think of all the players to come out of this tournament, she's the one that can hold her head high after the Brazil game today. And I would love to see her in the squad, maybe not necessarily on the field, but definitely in the squad, testing herself at that next level for the games against Canada coming up in a few weeks.
Well, on the subject of the Young Matildas next game, they, as we have pointed out on the pod already, they will be finishing their group stage of the Under-20 Women's World Cup against the Spanish at noon on Wednesday. Basically, as we've said, a win is a must if they are to progress out of the group stages. But so we've talked about this. Obviously, Spain, very, very tough ask. I mean, the Matildas got a first-hand look at how good Spain are increasingly becoming. At a senior level a few months ago, Spain have, ripped up this tournament in the past at an under-20 level as well. Do we think, I'm going to rephrase the question, do we think that Australia, because we have the cattle to keep it competitive, perhaps, do we think Australia will be set up in a manner that keeps it competitive?
The game to go for it was the game against Brazil today. I think we know what damage mitigation looks like and we know what it gets us, and I suspect we'll get it again.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to see us getting anything past Spain. In saying that, at the very least, there seemed to be recognition of the problem after the game today. Coach Leah Blaney did sort of say, there's very obvious things that went wrong. We didn't progress the ball enough. We kept possession and didn't do much with it. At least that was my interpretation of a Keep Up article that I read after having woken up at 6 a.m. So forgive me. But it seemed like there was a recognition of the issue, whether that means personnel changes. I would love to see Abby Lemon start. Because I think that she brings something different. And as I said, something that really struck me in the Costa Rica game was this unwillingness to run, much more than in the Brazil game. Brazil didn't let us have the kind of space, obviously, that Costa Rica let us have. Brazil, aside from their individual quality, were obviously very well drilled and knew their pressing triggers really, really well and capitalized on that. But when we were presented with space, I think that sort of we weren't taking advantage of it at all. So I'd like to see Abby Lemon start and try something a little bit different. Just because I am a goalkeeper nerd, I'd love to see Chloe Lincoln start as well. I'd love to see her get a game, but that's not going to make a difference attacking wise. Yeah, I mean, look, it's obviously very difficult. It'd be nice if we got if we looked vaguely threatening. I think if we lost, but the performance was better, I think we walk away from the tournament saying valuable experience, good lesson, good underage stuff. If we see more of the same, that would be a huge disappointment.
Well, I think, to be honest, it's difficult to maybe perhaps not see the fine TNC tradition of us saying that things can be better if we make changes in approach. These players play there, and then the exact same thing happens. The exact same players play and deployed in the exact same roles, Ains, rinse and repeat. But we are going to move on. But before we do move on to our next topic at a senior women's international level. Look at this. We got a full house coming. Josh Parrish has joined 34 minutes and 50 seconds into the broadcast. Josh,
Were you
welcome.
covering AFL today, Josh? Have you just come back from the MCG or something like that?
34 minutes, 50 seconds, but who's counting, right? No, I was busy calling a game at Heidelberg at Olympic Village in Avondale. Came away with a 4-1 win there to carry some form into Australia Cup. So, had lots of fun at call. Was enjoying your Young Matildas discussion.
Indeed. Well, before we move on to our next topic, which is Sam Kerr being nominated for the Ballon d'Or for the 4th time. Any comments on the Young Matildas before we move on, Josh?
Banger from Costa Rica. That's pretty much all I have to contribute. That was awesome. I mean, Costa Rica weren't very good, but their captain was awesome, and it was a fantastic free kick. So, and just it's good to see like a home nation go nuts over a women's youth team. I know we see it in football-made countries a lot, but still, it was like the celebrations after the banger were awesome.
Well, we will now move on to the captain of the Matildas, Sam Kerr. She has indeed been nominated for the highest individual honour in Australian football. Once more, the Ballon d'Or for the 4th time. She has been nominated for every women's Ballon d'Or since they have started giving it out. The only other player to achieve that mark is French captain Wendy Renard. Of course, all the other familiar names are nominated as well. Vivienne Miedema, Beth Mead, Alexandra Popp, Ida Hederberg, Alexia Putellas. We'll talk about Sam Kerr's case first before we just move on to the general trends that we can learn from this. But Sam Kerr, on an international level, doesn't mount the strongest case. Just putting our neutral hat on, Asian Cup was a disappointment. The Matildas' form, from a results basis, they did have to scrape past New Zealand, even if the performances were very good. Thumped in a lot of other friendlies. It's really club form in which is going to have to make up the vast majority of Sam Kerr's case, and her club form incredibly good. She's driving force behind Chelsea, scoring a few bangers at the end of the season to ensure that Chelsea won the Women's Super League. So, Teo, I'll go to you first, and then I'll go to Taryn, and then the rest of the panel. Is it possible for Sam Kerr to finally break through and win a women's Ballon d'Or based pretty much entirely off club form?
Here's the issue. The last men's player to win the Ballon d'Or while playing for an English club. Anyone want to name it? Here's a hint. 2001.
Michael Owen?
Michael Owen. Does anyone want to name the previous Ballon d'Or prior to that who was playing at an English club? Here's a hint. It was 1968.
So what you're saying is the French Ballon d'Or voters are racist against English people?
No, I'm saying George Best in 1968. So here's the issue. All of Sam Kerr's achievements, magnificent as they are, were for an English club. Now, international football, the Euros, as far as eliminating Sam Kerr's rivals, either through pre-tournament injury or through their teams not getting to the pointy end of the tournament, couldn't have done her more favours. Pop barely played club football. She was immense at the Euros, but had spent the entire season rehabbing from injury. Bonmati was sensational at the Euros, but Spain went out in the quarterfinals. Miedema was good in the games we saw her, but it was only 2 games because she got COVID mid-tournament. And Beth Mead, as good as she was, is an English player playing for an English club and therefore has even more of the problems that Sam Kerr has in a political sense. Football-wise, I think, look, Patea's missing the tournament. Kerr now has, as compelling a case as anyone. But, she was also the only player nominated from Asia, which suggests to me that there's maybe an inherent bias against players from the AFC Confederation. China wins the Asian Cup, didn't have a single player nominated. I don't know. So I think shenanigans may be afoot. Taryn, am I too cynical? Is it as simple as Kerr wins?
No, I don't think you're too cynical. I think that all of the evidence, I think in the women's game, there has been a kind of interesting shift between like international and club form and the sort of weighting on both, because I think it wasn't so long ago where although not for the Ballon d'Or, actually. So I'm talking nonsense because Ada Hegerberg won the Ballon d'Or. Anyway, there has been, I guess, a traditional emphasis on international form ahead of club form, and in that sense, had we won the Asia Cup, her case would be a lot stronger. I mean, her case isn't weak. There's no obvious
the thing that hurts it the most is Chelsea went out of the Champions League at the group stage. If Chelsea's in that Champions League final in Turin playing against one of Lyon or Barcelona, it's a totally different story.
Absolutely. I think that hurts. I mean, obviously Chelsea won the WSL, but besides that, I actually think her best chance is we make a run at the World Cup and she scores 6 goals. I think her next chance is next year. I'm not sure, but it's hard to rule against her because there's no one else really obvious.
The issue with next year is Pateas is back from her injury. Bon Mati's been on the shortlist now. Mead has been on the shortlist. Pop might be back for good, and other players might emerge. It's worth remembering that only 7 of last year's shortlist were nominated this year. Canada dusted, not a single nominee. So I assume that means that in Sydney and Brisbane we beat them 4-0 both games. So they've even got someone on the Ballon d'Or list. But Taryn, I've got to disagree with you. This is Kerr's best chance because who's the only opponent is politics and people's voting preferences, as opposed to a footballer with maybe a convincingly more compelling body of work.
Yeah, but I think that first point is actually probably more compelling than the football reasons often when it comes to these sorts of awards, unfortunately.
Well, that and I think the European voters will look at the Women's Champions League final. They'll see Chelsea went out in the group stage. Kerr didn't play in the Euros. And if they go to the trouble of Googling how Australia went at the Asian Cup, they'll see we went out in the quarterfinal. I do think there are quite a few dings along the way. And it's kind of like Thierry Henry, one of the best Premier League players of all time, still never won the Ballon d'Or. Like, what a joke, right? But that's because, sorry, Joey, I know you've given us quite the array of face acting during this segment, but the English just have a tougher time, and English players in the English league just have a tougher time winning these worldwide and continent-wide awards.
Because they hate us, because they ain't us. But yes, Nick DeBarno.
Just a quick point. Because I saw someone come through in the comments, I think it was Toros who mentioned that Ronaldo won't win it because she's a defender. I mean, that's a big point as well in terms of what goes in Kerr's favour is that these awards are usually tailored more towards attacking players. So that gives her, I think, a massive chance as well. I mean, I know the Matildas' form at the Asian Cup isn't great, when they go back and look at it. And Terry made a good point about the Champions League and everything else. But, I mean, her form from a club point of view is as good as any. So I think she's going to be right up there. I think it's just a matter of, it might just be voters' preference at the end of the day. We know these Ballon d'Or voters at the end of the day aren't always... They make some interesting choices. We've seen it a lot, especially with the men's over the last few years as well, where, there's been some quote-unquote unworthy winners and, some potentially skewing to other sides. So, I don't know. I think she's got a chance, but I think it's going to be tough. I mean, it comes down at the end of the day to almost individual preference because it could just be a matter of, a 3-2-1 system and who gets that extra vote and what's, I guess...
If it's 3-2-1, Chris Judd's going to win the Ballon d'Or.
Come on,
C. Judd, 3 votes. Carlton.
Daniel Kerr was right there, Teo, and you missed it.
No, I know. That's a reference to the 2010 Brownlow medal. But
yes, that's been put to the back of my mind there, Teo.
DeBarno got it.
I got it straight away. And we're not going to bring that up. Anyways, away from that, save the AFL references for another time, or maybe later.
I was just going to say, in the immortal words of Kent Brockman, I've said it once, I'll say it again. Democracy simply doesn't work.
Well, wanted to take a quick look now at the rest of the nominees. And we've pretty much touched on it in our chat, but this is a European-dominated award, just looking at the nominations. There are 14 players from UEFA nominated. Africa has 1, Asia has 1 in Kerr, South America has 1, the US has 4. Although given that one of them is 20-year-old Trinity Rodman, who I think has played 7 games for the national team, scoring a few goals. I don't think she played that much for the Spirit, in the last season either, maybe 12 games, 13, 14, something games like that. Not a lot. That one seems more like let's get the biggest name in the US women's national setup at the moment on the Ballon d'Or list. But is this are we ever going to get to the point where we don't have? Are we ever going to find ourselves not having 14, 15, 16 European players on these lists again, or is this just the state of things now, and this is how it's going to be?
It's just the way it
a lot
is.
of nods, just the way it is.
Some things will never change.
But I do think it is an interesting one, like in terms of, I think I spoke about this last time I was on TNC about the shift. I guess this like assumption that people have because they've heard of European teams, and therefore if someone's at a European team, you recognize the name, you go, wow, that's super impressive. But obviously in the women's game, it's different. So yeah, it is interesting. There's plenty of you'll see plenty of Americans on Twitter argue that actually it's not that impressive and the NWSL is actually amazing. Well, some people say, not me, not here, but some people do say, but it is an interesting shift, and then the Ballon d'Or nominees sort of reflect that shift, I think.
Well,
yeah, but they're playing for teams called like Oklahoma Triumph and stuff, so no one takes them seriously.
I don't know. I heard Racing Louisville's got a pretty good midfielder.
Don't forget that in the NWSA, in the NWSL, they play soccer. They do not play football. It is
soccer, women's soccer.
It is absolutely soccer over in that league.
Chitty, bang, bang.
All right. But do we want to have a quick word on the men's award? Because
we can have a quick look on the men's award, because we do need to. Hopefully, somebody can leave us a comment. Somebody just say Ronaldo versus Messi in the comments or something to get us that sweet clickbait. Because Lionel Messi has not been nominated for the men's Ballon d'Or for the first time since 2005 in his first year in a Paris Saint-Germain kit. Despite his continental success, not nominated. Paris Saint-Germain teammate Neymar is not nominated either. Cristiano Ronaldo is nominated for the award, despite arguably making Manchester United much worse. He has still been nominated. Karim Benzema looking like potentially the favourite, and then you've got other familiar names there: Mo Salah, Harry Kane, Kevin De Bruyne, Robert Lewandowski, and Erling Haaland. What do we make of Messi not being nominated for the Ballon d'Or?
That's what it should be. He didn't have a good season.
Pessy washed, Ronaldo goated. Yeah.
What is this, the Gagan pod?
No, I mean, he didn't have a good season, Joey. So, I mean, it's finally looking at, the best players on the currently in form right now. And, if you...
Well, then why is Ronaldo nominated?
Well, because Ronaldo scored a lot of goals, Joey, and people look at goals and assists. How,
why isn't Craig Goodwin nominated?
Goodwin on that list, yes.
Justice for Craig. It's Benzema. It's Benzema. Come on.
I mean, Karim Benzema should win it, but don't ask me who should win it, because my answer will definitely be biased. I'm not going to even answer because there's two AC Milan players on that list. But anyways, I mean, there are a few questionable players on this list, and if I start going down the rabbit hole, then we're going to be here for a while.
Is it 30 players as an appeasement exercise, so that each confederation and many of the nations that are big nations can go away and say, we got a Ballon d'Or nominee? Why is it not 20? Why? I mean, especially if Benzema is going to win it, and the vast majority of people on that list of 30 aren't going to get a single vote.
But there's but as you mentioned, Tara, some of the players on this list are from UEFA. So it's not like we're appeasing to just get the one tokenistic, Asian player or African player. There are some players in here who just shouldn't be because they just haven't had good seasons and haven't been in good enough form. I can see one that's staring at me right off the page in Dusan Vlahovic. He had a good 6 months at Fiorentina and then was a flop for his first 6 months at Juventus. So
if Ante was here, he would. The next 15 minutes would purely be plotted out for him to rant about.
But yeah, look, end of the day, I think Karim Benzema is going to win it. I think, Taylor, you make a good point. You probably could shorten it. I think it is you could sort of have it's down in your record book forever if some of these players, their careers completely fall off the face of the earth, that, hey, I was nominated for the Ballon d'Or, once upon a time, and I was on the short list. When in reality, it probably could just be 20, even less, 10 players, and make it, really shorten it. Because let's be real, how many of these players are going to get votes? Like out of the, how many is it, 40 players? How many are actually going to get a vote?
6 or 7. Taryn, is it as simple as Benzema and Field, or is there anyone in the field that you think could be any sort of chance?
Yeah, not really, to be honest. I was happy that they didn't. It was a good thing they didn't nominate Messi. It irritates me they still nominated Ronaldo because he also, Man U obviously didn't have a great season. At least there is some movement towards, people that deserve to be there. But yeah, it is pretty much Benzema.
Justice for Wesley Schneider 2010.
Looking at the list of names nominated, Heung-min Son nominated again, only Asian player on the list. We talked about the preference for European players in the women's. Like, open-ended question for anybody that wants to respond. What does Heung-min Son, what does any Asian player need to do to actually win a Ballon d'Or? Like,
win the World Cup.
Yeah, win the World Cup.
Only way?
Yep.
Yeah.
Maybe make the final while winning player of the tournament and the golden boot. Like,
Heung-min Son leads.
If Son had an amazing season, say Tottenham won the Champions League, that I think could put him in the running. I think he'd have to do something else as well with like the Korean national team, as you mentioned, Teo. Whether it's winning the Asian Cup and like winning
Asian Cup wouldn't be enough. It'd have to be the World Cup. I think it would add a little bit of gravity. It wouldn't be enough to get him over the line entirely, but I think a really good run at the World Cup. Because let's be real, like the chances of South Korea actually winning the World Cup are minuscule. I mean, they came close in 2002 to get into the final, but if say they had really. Yeah, say that. Don't get started. Say they got. Does Byron Moreno have kids? Can we have them on the repping panel for 2023? Here's a question, Nick. What about say Sadio Mane? So Senegal win the AFCON. Yep. If he scored a hat trick in the Champions League final and Liverpool win, are we for purely doing it on the biggest stage? See, even I don't think that's enough. I think Senegal would have to win a World Cup as well. I don't think a continental championship, unless it's the Euros or the Copa America, is enough, unfortunately.
Fair enough. No, I get what you mean. I think it's hard because, as well, like Mane's that classic, when he was at Liverpool was like the second spoke on the three-headed dog. Like he was always sort of overshadowed by Salah as the other guy. He was scoring a lot of goals and was putting in these great performances, but was always overshadowed by Salah. So, in terms of voters' preference, they're always going to look at Salah in that sense. So, I don't know. I think with those players that are outside of Europe or outside of South America, it's always going to be really difficult by the weight of, where they're from. That because they have to get it done, as you mentioned, with that added bonus of doing something special on the international stage. And it has to be some sort of freakish effort, from a club level standpoint. I think Salah is a bit of an outlier because he probably is the best player in the world right now. But, I don't know.
But he plays in England, so he can't win, according to Teo's theory.
And I think
unless he's Michael Owen or Stanley Matthews or Bobby Charlton, I don't like his chances.
I think Son could win it, but it would, as you mentioned, Teo, a lot would have to go his way. Because I think he's certainly good enough to be in, say, the reckoning to be maybe the top 15, top 10 players in the world. But it would take something really special. It would take a lot.
All right.
I'll tell you what then. Spurs win the Champions League this year. Who rises higher in the Ballon d'Or vote? Asian Son or English Kane?
Depends what Kane does, because Kane gets injured for half a season all the time, Joey. So, let's be real. Like, Harry Kane wouldn't win it because he doesn't play enough games. I think Son would actually have a better chance. But by the weight of, if he has a starring role and wins player of the tournament, amazing season in the Premier League as well. Like, honestly, if Tottenham were to win multiple trophies this year, which is something Tottenham haven't done in years, would that add extra weight to it? Because he's won trophies with Tottenham. Like, he wins a European trophy, maybe a domestic trophy as well, and helps South Korea to a good run at the World Cup. Teo, does that move the needle enough maybe to push him a little bit higher if he does that with Spurs?
That's his Ballon d'Or campaign slogan. Lads, it's Spurs. Come on.
Harry Kane's, it would be more right.
But Harry Kane won't have played enough games. Son will play every week. Like, that's the thing.
Is there a reason why Maradona's not even in the top 3 in 1986 or 1987? Like, yeah. Can you guys even... Can you guys... hello, Joey. No, I do not think... Look, if South Korea wins the World Cup, then yes. But I don't think what he does at Tottenham would factor into that at the end of the day.
It doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't matter what Kane does at Tottenham because he's going to win the World... Because next year he's going to win the World Cup with England, so he's going to get the Ballon d'Or that way.
We know that worst Korea is not winning the World Cup. That is true.
All right, I'm going to move this conversation on. We're going to get to the Australia Cup. Taryn, do you want to stick around for the Australia Cup, or is this where we say goodbye?
This is where we say goodbye. Thank you so much for having me and for messaging me this time. I really appreciate that. So, although the link did only happen about 2 minutes before, so that was this week's thing. But I did get a message in the morning, so we're clear.
Tremendous ticker tonight, Taryn.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
everybody
you
in the
very
chat
much.
say goodbye to Taryn.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
Well, as Taryn departs with us, we can move on to the Australia Cup. Magic of the Cup set. The round of 16 has commenced. And, well, we'll start with the midweek games before we get on to the really meaty stuff. On Wednesday, Sydney FC came to town to take on the Bentley Greens. Unfortunately for fans of Magic, none on offer that night down at Kingston Heath Soccer Complex. Sydney FC.
Altona wasn't playing, so it's a shame. But
no Victorian nuffery. We need to steer away
Neither
from
was Broadmeadow,
excess
so.
Victorian nuffery in a professional context. But Sydney FC 2, Bentley Greens 1. Who wants to go first? What do we make of the Cup specialist Bentley Greens having their run cut short by Steve Corica's side?
I think they can hold their heads pretty high, Joey. I think considering they were just ravaged by injuries, Josh, you sent through telling us. I think we had in a separate group chat. Nick Hughes from obviously sent a message actually asking does Bentley Greens actually have a shot? And Josh, you just rattled off all these names of players that were injured that didn't either play in the Doherty Cup or got injured in the Doherty Cup.
I'm not
final.
in this group chat. What?
No, it's a separate group chat. It's for the F&R employees only.
It's called the No Joey Club.
Are you saying there's an elitist clique in the media and F&R?
Yes, and we all have no personality, so I can definitely tell you all that. So, anyways, continuing. Bentley, I think, considering the players they had out and the overall performance they put in, I think they played as well as they could. Sydney just had a bit of individual quality in some key moments. Good goal from Segasic. The header as well from Gerb was good. They just took their chances when it mattered. But Bentley, I think, definitely were good value to push this game beyond 90 minutes. They came at him at the end. Ajak Riak scored. Probably should have had a second as well. And he's certainly someone who, if you put your best case forward in the cup for potentially getting a move elsewhere, he's someone to certainly keep an eye on. I think that, Nick Tolios can be quite pleased with how they performed against Sydney FC on the national stage. It's disappointing that, just before we went on air, well, during the time we've been on air, they've actually lost against Port Melbourne at home in their NPL Victoria campaigns. They might not even play finals this year. But considering they've won the Doherty Cup, they've made it to the round of 16 of the Australia Cup. And, they should still play finals. I think it's still been a very, very successful campaign for Bentley, considering all those injuries as well. And some bad news as well that I'm not too sure if you guys have been aware of, but Christian Cavallo having another injury the other week as well, a hamstring injury. So, he just came back after 16 months on the sidelines with a knee. So he played, I think, 2 or 3 games, and then he's done his hamstring. So not sure if he'll be back or he still might be a chance if they play finals. But it's disappointing that, another player who has a very bright, I'm not going to say had. I still think he's got a lot of ability, but someone who has a bright future, someone who has a lot of ability, just can't seem to get a clear run at the moment. So, nonetheless, I think overall, despite the loss, I think that there's a lot to like from Bentley. And for Sydney, well, they got the job done. They've still got players to come in. They weren't at full strength. They're into the quarters. Curious to see what they're like when they're actually get to, when they get the likes of Mac and co all ready to go, and they have a full picture out there.
Well, and just quickly to touch on something you mentioned a couple of weeks ago when I wasn't on, pulling out of their final NPL New South Wales game of the season and forfeiting because their players were committed to senior football and either training or playing with them. I mean, Gerd has been, really good in NPL New South Wales. I'm glad he's getting an opportunity. His centre-back partner, Nathan Grimaldi, has been excellent as well, and he's one for the future too. But, we saw Kaczarski in the penalty shootout. We've seen Girdwood Reich, who, seriously, from the start of the NPL season, even to now, he has grown up. A season of playing senior football against men every week, all of a sudden he's realised, hang on, I can hold my own, I can start dishing it out. And it's actually been quite transformative to see. So, I think that any Sydney FC fan who is watching this from their youngsters coming through, their ladder position is not false form. It's standing up in the cup, and I just hope these guys get minutes in the A-League men's.
Of course, the joke answer demands that I say I look forward to watching them on the bench every week for Sydney FC's A-League men's side.
No, I look forward to them getting 3 minutes in stoppage time as a victory cigar.
Before moving to, they're going to Western Sydney. No, Melbourne City or Western Sydney Wanderers to actually play minutes. That seems to be the current.
Or Jets or Wellington or literally
anywhere
anywhere but Sydney.
Yeah, that's a joke, Sydney FC fans. This is apparently the new...
I wasn't joking. No, this is just placeholder minutes before they sign their star players on the eve of the season, and they've already started doing that. So, it's just not in Sydney FC's DNA. They are not a development club. Yes, they have a really good youth team, but when push comes to shove, when you get to the finals, when we get to the business end of the A-League season, are these guys going to be playing? Nothing I've seen from Sydney FC or Steve Corica suggests that they will be.
Well, we'll get to Sydney FC's roster construction in a second, but we'll get to the other game that took place on Wednesday night. Macarthur 4, the Modbury Jets 0. The State League Jets run in the Cup comes to an end at the hands of the Bulls. Modbury started... they started with energy, I'd call it. I don't think they had a few shots and all that sort of stuff. I never really felt that the Bulls were in mortal danger. And then the Bulls' opening goal of the game, Al Hassan Toure in the 9th minute, they just sort of all right, we're going to score now, scored, and then just sort of settled back down, ended up running out 4-0. Victor's, I was, of course, being the propagandist that I am, interested in this game because it was the first time that we saw Daniel Arzani, number 99, start for the Macarthur Bulls. The good news is that he was involved in the build-up play. You were seeing the signs there that, the talent that he has, and he got through 65 minutes without any limb of his blowing up, which is a good sign. Now, he actually did get through 90 minutes on a few occasions in Belgium last season. So, he's not actually this is the most minutes he's played in 4 years sort of thing. But did anybody else have any takeaways from the Bulls versus the Jets? Now, with Dwight York 2-0 as a Bulls coach.
Yeah, if we actually ranked in terms of strength, the teams 1 to 32 in the round of 32, have Macarthur drawn the 32nd and 31st ranked teams? Or does the fact that Modbury beat Armidale maybe suggest they've beaten, say, the 32nd in Magpies Crusaders and the 28th or the 29th? And let's maybe wait for the quarterfinal draw before we all start saying Macarthur's here.
Well, Antonis has told us in the comments before that the Jets actually probably outspend quite a few South Australia NPL sides and have been promoted. So, but yeah, they'd have to be. And now he's pointing out that you've forgotten the Mindelaces as well there. So they'd probably be at least in the high 20s. But yeah, the Bulls have probably been quite fortunate enough. But hey, maybe that's what you need. If you're Dwight York, you're a new coach, you're trying to bed down your system, you're trying to figure out how to play with all your new toys. There's obviously a lot of attacking talent there. And Philip Rollo messaged me during the week to inform me that Ulysses de Villa is back in Sydney. Obviously, we don't know when he's going to be able to play, if he's going to be able to play. That's not for anybody to decide except him, but apparently he is in Sydney. So maybe this is what the Bulls need, to just take some time, sort things out, and, kick the shit out of a few state league teams before they get to the real meat of the Australia Cup.
It's certainly a soft entrance for Dwight York. I mean, you mentioned
Do we think they're fixing it so he can get a few wins?
You mentioned you never felt the Bulls were in mortal danger. I think the Bulls were in more danger from a rodeo clown dressed as Andrew Redmayne. So there was never any doubt that they were going through in both of these games. Modbury, happy to be there. Let's be honest. They did tremendously well to get that far.
Well, moving on then to the two games that took place today, we'll save the best for last. So we'll go to the game that you called, Teo Pellizzeri, alongside Phil Moss.
I thought you were about to bring up Dandenong Thunder 0 Melbourne victory too. But,
So we'll move on to the game you called, Teo. Sad news for NPL Victoria fans. Green Gully. It really was a 1-2 punch. They took the lead in the 69th minute. Nice. But then 2 goals in a minute. Smith and Woolley. And all of a sudden, the Queenslanders, Peninsula Power, are through. Gully are going home. What did you make of the game, Tayo?
Up until the 2 goals in literally 1 minute, not successive minutes, the same minute. You almost never see that in football. But Gully were on top, had created the better chances, and were, had the territorial advantage. I saw possession stats. It was something like 55-45. So not a profound difference, but Alex Salmon hit the woodwork. Josh Hope missed a glaring one-on-one in the first half. They should have gone to the break with the lead. Josh Hope made amends. He scored a goal. Really nice assist by Mamadi Kamara that took a little deflection on the way, and he nodded it in. And at that point, it really did look like Peninsula were out of ideas, just trying to break the deadlock from 0-0. Never mind chase the game from 1-0 down, but they brought on a sub who was absolutely transformative in the way the game panned out. It was Solomon Weldemariam. Gee, I only commentated the game 3 hours ago, but dear oh dear. And he came on for Jake McLean, so they replaced a short, quick, buzzing around sort of attacking midfielder with a big proper target man. And he just threw his weight around and was able to win the ball and provide a target. And that was the difference. I think that the Olympico from the corner from Woolley, who was probably man of the match, was just a really well-hit set piece. And Liam Driscoll got his bearings wrong at the near post. He was under the ball. For a guy who's, I'm guessing, at least 195, if not 2 meters tall, he just got it wrong at the corner. In goes the Olympico. And then so quick was the goal, we were still in a replay. I'll lift the curtain. I haven't flown back from Brisbane. I was calling this off the tube. We come out of the replay, and Alex Smith is tapping the ball in for 2-1. And it turns out that it was Weldemariam's shot that was parried by Driscoll into the oncoming Smith's path. But I still don't actually know how Green Gully gave away possession from kickoff. That's how quickly it happened. And credit to Peninsula Power for holding on. Gully still created a couple of chances before the end of the game. Iannucci was subbed off. He didn't have his best game, but Luke Jego was quite busy. Josh Hope was quite busy. And Kamara was a game changer in the sense that he was the person who had seemingly won the game for Gully, coming on for Matt Fletcher with his creativity on the left flank. But, Gully would absolutely feel as though they've blown it. And it was a great celebration from Peninsula at full time. They had a rowdy crowd. They had heaps of young children, spectators, juniors. It's everything the Cup is all about, to be honest. And we could have 3 Queensland teams in the quarterfinals, depending on results next week on Wednesday. So it's Queensland's year. We've had Victoria's year. We've had New South Wales's year. Some people thought this was going to be South Australia's year, but it could be your territory, Barnaby Josh. It could be Queensland.
Well, I think Weldemariam former would be a name familiar to Brisbane Raw fans, former Raw youth. I think he's only 19, 20 years old, quite a young lad too. So good to see him kicking on. Before I get to the main event, Josh, Nick, any thoughts on the elimination of Ajax Green Gully from the competition?
I was going to say, cool story for Phil Zabax, who had retired and then came out of retirement to play for Penn Power, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. And would you believe, Josh, Phil Moss and the late Mike Cockerell were actually commentating the game in the New South Wales State League that he was playing for Bonnyrigg 11 years ago, where he suffered the serious head injury and concussion that leads him to still wearing the helmet to this very day.
Yeah, the Petacek style headwear is the reason behind that. So he's got a great story. So really happy for him. One of the best blokes in NPL football, I would say, having interviewed him a long while back. Gully, I don't know, they're one of the most talented rosters in NPL nationwide, but they just seem to have this soft underbelly about them sometimes. You never really think they're going to win anything. Even though they play some of the best football in NPL Victoria. So I think that came to the fore, and they, goalkeeper had a bit of a nightmare, and they just choked. Like 2 goals in a minute. There's no other explanation for that. They just weren't, mentally prepared for the pressure, I suppose. Even though they were definitely the more talented, better side out there.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, we spoke about it. I don't know if we actually mentioned it last week. I think I'm getting all my podcasts mixed up when I talk about NPL Victoria. Probably just a cheap plug for the NPL Victoria pod on F&R. I mean, Green Gully do look pretty tight at this stage of the season. I mean, Lockie Flanagan, who I was chatting to recently, obviously he spoke about it, that when he did the Melbourne Knights game during the catch-up round weekend, they looked cooked. And I mean, at this stage of the season, I just wonder if maybe that's starting to catch up with them a little bit. They didn't have Noel Bernardo today as well, which obviously is a big out for them. And, we know how good Noel Bernardo is. And he's arguably probably one of their most talented, if not their most talented player. So it is a bit disappointing to see him go out. As Josh mentioned, it is weird. It does feel like they do have a bit of that soft underbelly because they're certainly talented to be right up there amongst the best in Victoria. Obviously, they are 4th, but they could go that one step better. They could be contending with the likes of Oakley and Port Melbourne and South Melbourne, but they just have this real sort of scratchy form, and it seems like right now it's starting to come to the fore a little bit. So, yeah, I mean, back to the drawing board for them. I mean, they're playing Eastern Lions on Thursday, which for them is essentially a game that really they should win quite comfortably, considering Eastern Lions are relegated by some way in NPL Victoria. But I'm a bit disappointed that they've gone out in the round of 16. I had them almost penciled in for a win today. I thought, look, that they should be able to beat Peninsula Power today. They've been in good enough form, but yeah, bit of a disappointing way to end. And to concede 2 goals in a minute like that after being ahead, it's a bit concerning.
Well, we can now move on to it. The biggest result thus far from the round of 16, defending A-League men champions Western United, heading up to Sydney to take on Sydney, Croatia. And, well, they took the lead. It was weird, actually. I mean, Western United had more possession. Weird. But they copped an equaliser. The game went to extra time. Still no winner. Penalty shootout. And then the magic of the cup happened. Steven Lustitsa missing his penalty. Christian Gonzalez scoring his. Sydney United winning the penalty shootout 4-3, advancing through to the quarterfinals, taking the scalp of the reigning champions of the Victorian top year. We had a pitch invasion. We had some proper magic, didn't we, boys?
Yeah, absolutely. And can I just say, this is real traditionalist areas here, but there is something I love about day games and the scenes of like a good day game, for a cup or whatever it might be. That might be my inner Victorian coming out, speaking about the traditionalists and playing games, big games during the day. But I mean, it just felt like there was something different about, playing a 2:00 start on a Sunday, pretty decent turnout, it looks like, at least from a broadcast point of view. And the scenes afterward were just sensational. I mean, the thumbnail that the Australia Cup YouTube page has actually got up on when you search Australia Cup on Google is a photo of obviously one of the, I can't tell exactly who it is, but they're on the shoulders of one of the fans. They got their finger up, and it actually looks a little bit like, with the red jerseys and everything else, a little bit like that famous 1966 England World Cup winning photo of them up on the shoulders. I know I probably shouldn't be saying that too loud, but just it does look a little bit like that. And it's a really cool snap. I mean, does that photo, do you think, like kind of encapsulate what we love so much about the Cup? Pitch invasions, cup sets, a team that are semi-professional, that just knocked off the A-League men's champions in a game like that on their home deck, and seeing those sort of, those sort of scenes. Like, you don't see this in any other competition throughout Australia, that you have a team that has, like Sydney United, who have been around for so long, who have a strong fan base, who, as mentioned, semi-professional, can go and take on the A-League men's champions and beat them and knock them off in a situation like that. You don't see that in any other sport here in Australia. I think that's really special. So I loved it. I loved everything about the spectacle. From a game point of view, Western United missed a ton of chances early in the game. Probably should have had a couple goals had it not been for poor finishing and the crossbar. And I mean, Jamie Young, I don't know what he was doing for the equaliser. I don't know if there was a deflection or if he just got wrong-footed when the ball just kind of travelled through the sea of bodies. But at the end of the day, I think it's a bit of a disappointing exit for Western United. I think for them personally, I think they would have had aspirations to win the cup and to go out in this sort of manner. I think that it's, I wouldn't say it's alarm bells, but I just think it's a bit of a sour note for them to end their cup tourney like that. But for Sydney United, dare to dream for another round, and let's see how long this can go on for, because I'm really excited for them.
I think, Nick, I'll speak to the Sydney United side of things, and Joey and Josh, you might be able to speak more to the Western side of things. But the crowd today was probably, and this is no disrespect, because I've been out at Adenza Park commentating some of Sydney United's games this season. There were probably more fans there today than every other home game they've played there combined this season. I was there when they got rocked 6-1 by Sydney FC's youth team. Joey Hayward, the coach, or Joe Hayward, I should say, the coach, parted ways the next day. At that point, I think they'd been on a 4-game losing streak. No relegation in the top flight for NPL New South Wales this season, but certainly that poor run of form cost them any shot at the finals. But their form was just starting to turn. We saw them beat Monaro Panthers 3-0 quite comfortably, and I thought it was in service of playing in the Waratah Cup final, where they lost 2-1 to the Northwest Sydney Spirit from the second tier, albeit a team that's been promoted out of the second tier into the top tier next season. I mean, I watched that cup final last Sunday. They weren't great. They were not great. They did not look like a team that was primed to come in and knock off the defending A-League men's champions. But what was heartwarming about it is, as bad as some of the crowds have been this season for the Sydney United team, and as bad as a season as they've had relative to their expectations of what they could achieve, there was a real build it and they will come element to it. And it's the sort of thing that, with the National Second Division on the horizon, and when we get to NPL chat, I'll talk about maybe my number one contender to be a team out of New South Wales to get elevated to that National Second Division stage. This was a sleeping giant that brought the fans back. And hopefully, not for one last hurrah, and a day like today, will get out in the community of people that have followed Sydney United traditionally, or are the descendants of Sydney United people that just didn't give it a go due to generational change, and to say it's still here and it's still special and you can still have days like today. And I will be back. I just need to go and refill my water bottles because we're going 4 hours tonight, fellas.
Stay hydrated, Taya. Yeah, I do think there are these teams with dormant fan bases that people somewhat look at their attendances in NPL and underrate the kind of crowd that they could potentially pull when there's a competition like this that does capture the imagination, and it clearly did. For Western United, I guess this is one of the rare times where they have to actually have the ball and take initiative in games, and they're not used to dealing with that. And yes, no question, Sydney United rode their luck for large parts of the game. There were a couple of posts rattled and chances, and a great performance from Daniel Nizic, the ex-Wanderers goalkeeper. But that was always going to have to happen for an underdog like Croatia, who are not having a great NPL season, as Teo pointed out, to knock them off. But yeah, I just think Western United, when they're forced to take the initiative in games, are nowhere near the same team as when they can play in transition and soak up pressure at A-League level. So they were always liable to a potential banana skin, a potential cup set in this sort of situation, and it's proven the case.
Well, I'll ask this question of you, Josh, and then maybe you can jump in as well, Nick DeBarno. But this game, another game in which Western United were missing Alex Prijovic, obviously weren't able to convert their chances and put the game away, having a lot of the ball, maybe missing something up front. Somebody could hold it up and, get things going as players got forward. how let's be unsubtle. How rooted are Western United without Alex Prijovic or a suitable replacement before the season starts?
They're in trouble. Dylan Wenzel-Halls has never played his best football as a lone striker, as an out-and-out lone striker. He's always played better football when he's had someone to bounce off of. So, that patch of form he had at Brisbane Roar with Scott McDonald essentially playing as his pivot, and he was able to face goal. And that's where Dylan Wenzel-Halls does his best work. Also, relentless pressing, really willing worker defensively for the team as well, which is why so many coaches love him. But he's not a hold-up man. Like, he's not gonna play as a target. And Western need that because a lot of their play comes from wide areas and the fullbacks getting forward, Risdon and Garuccio. And if you've got no target in the penalty area to aim for with those crosses and no one to act as a focal point in build-up play, you're in trouble. So I think they need a Prijovic type to come in and replace him because they seem pretty, like, the signs don't seem good anyway. Maybe he'll come back, but I don't see it.
Okay, so to answer your original question, I think rooted is a very strong word there, Joey. Because, I don't think they're totally in the mud per se if, Prijovic doesn't come back. I think that, as you mentioned, Josh, playing Wenzel-Halls as a 9 can work in only some game scenarios, namely if they're playing in transition and could just play him off the shoulder and play off the break and, play Lockie Wales and Connor Payne alongside him and just go zoomies all day. And basically, like we saw early in the season last year against Melbourne City, when they were playing, in that sort of manner, playing off the break and Dylan Wenzel-Halls led the line. I mean, he scored that game and he looked quite decent in that game as well. But if they're going to have more of the ball, and they're going to play a certain way, I mean, considering the way Prijovic ended last season, they're going to have to go and get a replacement. And I don't think there are many players at this stage of the transfer window in world football who they can just go and get, who's going to be a big number 9, who's going to be able to hold up the ball and do what he did, not only when he had the ball, but be someone who could incorporate other players to the game, have those deft touches. Because it wasn't just his hold up play per se. It was when he was just get those little flicks, get himself in those right areas, that experience, that goal now. And we saw it when
someone who can occupy the centre halves.
Absolutely. And the other underrated part of it is draw attention from defenders in the way that Prijovic did, because the size of Prijovic is one thing, but it's the fact that he's a proven goal scorer and you can't give that guy an inch of space inside the box. And what you saw in so many occasions was by defenders being drawn to him, the spaces it would open up for Wenzel-Halls when he was playing alongside him, or Lockie Wales or Connor Payne. They thrived a lot more when Prijovic was in the side because, centre-backs are so drawn to this big presence up front. So if he does leave, which I think, honestly, it could be a situation from what I'm gathering is that, Western United probably are kind of, resigned to the fact he probably isn't coming back. I think what we have seen here is they're going to have to go and get another striker. Noah Botic, who I think should be getting some more minutes, isn't the answer if they want to have a big hold-up striker. I think he could be a serviceable player if they're looking to play in transition. But I think they're going to have to look to get someone in there in that same mold if they're going to play in that specific manner. So who they can get, I don't know. I really don't know who's available at this stage. Someone of that sort of presence with, that sort of, they're going to have to fork out ridiculous cash as well to get someone in of that ilk as well. So yeah, it's they've got obviously about 2 months till the season starts, but to get a transfer in, I don't know, and then get them integrated into the squad is one other thing altogether. And we saw when Prijovic started slow last year, I mean, Western United were winning games, but that was the streak of 1-0s when they weren't winning games convincingly. They were playing sort of, just playing exclusively, as we mentioned, in transition and just hoping they could, get it off solid defense and just jam a win. So I don't know. We actually had a question about it on Twitter from Julian actually asking as well, do they need to replace Rene Kerr too? I actually don't think they do. Because I think they already have a replacement of someone who I think has enormous scope this season and I think should continue to get minutes by the name of Reece Bozanovsky. And again, I think he would benefit from more minutes in that sense. I do think they will look at getting a foreign 6 in. So I don't know exactly who that profile would be, but if it was up to me, I'd like to see more of Reece Bozanovsky this season. Or Joey, I know, we've all kind of forgotten about him, but he's still on the books. Luke Giselle as well, or whoever it might be, to occupy some more midfield minutes, because I think Reece Bozanovsky has shown a lot. So, yeah, it'll be an interesting wait and see over the next 2 months to see what they do, whether they go and get a 6, or if they go and get a replacement for Prijovic, or if maybe Prijovic decides to come back. That's the whole other wild card in this. Like, he might U-turn and turn around and say, well, you know what, I want to play football. I'm going to come back and I'm going to see this out. So, yeah, it's going to be fascinating nonetheless.
Well, I think the only real notable Australian central forward still available is David Williams, who's a free agent. So,
and
if
not the
they
right
are
profile of player either.
Yeah, no.
So it looks like
what's Diego Costa doing these days?
Still a free agent, I think. I mean, I'm looking through the free agent to have a transfer market now.
Are we convinced that Danny Osvaldo ain't come? Like, there's a lot of good music scenes he can play out in Melbourne.
What about? But can we entice him with a beach as well? Like, is there a good enough beach? What is he going to be enticed by Williamstown Beach? Is that going to be enough?
It's funny, when I was, if I can go super niche, when I was working at the old Fairfax Community Weeklies before they got sold off, the woman who wrote for the Hobson's Bay area used to write a story about the nudist beach at Altona almost like once a month. It seemed as though that was the go-to story, the nudist beach at Altona. I'd never heard of it before. I've never heard about it since. But when I was working in newspapers, they used to talk about it all the time.
What are you trying to say here, Teo?
That's the real Altona magic.
Oh, Jesus Christ. All right. I'm going to move us on, and it's the natural segue. We'll move from the Australia Cup to the real main event, the reason we're all here. NPL chat, National Premier Leagues.
Far out, we all had a good weekend with the NPL. Just as a quiet, we all had just a really good game this weekend, or at least a good result to come out of it. Like, it's been great.
Teo, we'll go to you first. New South Wales NPL. It's now entered the finals, and we had quite a lot of drama as Premiers Sydney Olympic faced Manly United. Run it down for us.
Sorry if my internet just froze there and I'm a bit late to answer your question here, Joey. Top 5 in New South Wales. Marconi were eliminated by RPL Leichhardt last week, and Sydney Olympic, it's the old Final 5 system, to use another AFL reference, but Sydney Olympic had the weekend off and they faced Manly United, who had themselves had a truly miraculous win in the second versus third match against Blacktown City last weekend. For those of you who didn't see it, I think Joey did mention it on last week's TNC though. The game was 0-0 through 90 minutes. Blacktown City took a 1-0 lead in extra time, only for Manly United to equalise in the 119th minute. Blacktown then subbed their keeper in anticipation of a penalty shootout, only for that keeper to then watch the ball hit the back of his net in the 123rd minute, giving Manly a 2-1 win. Now, you might say, all right, they've used up all their luck. Now they're playing against Sydney Olympic. But let's not forget, these two teams finished level on points at the end of the year, and the title was only decided by 1 goal's difference. So they were pretty much neck and neck all the way through. And the 2 games they'd played between each other, 1-0 win for Manly back in March and a 0-0 draw in May. And at the 15-minute mark of the first half, and you can go back and hear it, I said in the call, based on the number of shots on goal in this game and the chess match and tug of war that it is, I think we're going the distance. Now, it was 0-0 after 90 minutes, true to form, but Sam McElhatton broke the deadlock in the 108th minute, I think, second half of extra time. Nice goal through a sea of legs in the penalty area. And then in the 122nd minute, end of stoppage time, corner kick, in swinger, little touch into the 6-yard box, and Bruno Mendes taps in for a dramatic equaliser for Manly United. And yet, in the penalty shootout, Sydney Olympic still had a shot to win it. And Fabio Ferreira, the former Chelsea man, the Portuguese national who had played for Central Coast and Adelaide, amongst others, and then been in the NPL for quite a time since his A-League days, he missed the shot to send Sydney Olympic into the grand final. There was another miss after that, and Manly United, through Luca Komet, punched their ticket to the grand final. So they will be lining up at Copenhagen Stadium in Parramatta on the 27th of August, which is a Saturday, and their opponent will be either Sydney Olympic, who get a second chance, or Blacktown City, who defeated RPA Leichhardt 2-0 today. So that's the state of play in New South Wales. I actually thought Blacktown were the best team in the run home. However, Sydney Olympic beat them on the last day of the season 2-0, and it meant that Blacktown, who actually started the day on top of the league, ended up third behind both Sydney Olympic and Manly, 41-41-40. Doesn't get much closer than that. The three best teams in the league have found their way through to the penultimate weekend of the season. Your guess is as good as mine as to who wins it, though, because when you have Manly quite literally coming back from the dead 2 weeks in a row, no one is going to feel safe holding a lead against them in the grand final. So it's been a ripping season, and I think it's honestly party time out at Valentine Sports Park, because Sydney United, beating Western United today hasn't been a great Australia Cup in terms of who went and the results for Football New South Wales, but they have a ripping NPL, and they now have, for the second cup in a row, one of their teams beating an A-League opponent. So that's the state of play in New South Wales. All very entertaining.
Well, I want to ask you about Manly United, Teo, but I think you need to go and turn off your microwave, so I'll come back to you during the next phase of the chat. And before we get to Victorian Nuffery, we will quickly whip around the other NPL. So NPL South Australia, their regular season has now completed. Adelaide City getting it done on the last day of the season, winning the premiership by a single point over Campbelltown City. So Juventus, I think they've won a ton of titles in South Australia, but not actually that many premierships. So Adelaide City getting another trophy for their cabinet there. Also want to give a shout out to the Metro Stars, who finished fourth, not for any reason in particular other than the fact that they have been raising money for Canteen Australia this season, and they've had the Canteen logo on their shorts. But looking elsewhere around the NPLs, at leagues still in action, although we are coming to the pointy ends of their campaigns. Up in Queensland, nobody's catching the Queensland Lions. They're on 51 points. Next best, Brisbane Olympic FC. They are only on 38 points. So Queensland Lions will be premiers of NPL Queensland, and looking like very healthy bets to take out the championship as well. I look forward to seeing half their squad sign with NPL Victoria sides next season. Moving across, NPL WA in their final weeks, but maybe a three-horse race for the premiership. Floria Athena leading 43 points. Some of your Macedonian friends, Josh Parrish, Sterling Lions on 42 points in second position on the table. And then Perth Red Star, brand new entity, Perth Red Star, absolutely nothing to do with any other clubs called Red Star or any history behind that. They just thought Red Star sounded cool. They're third on 39 points. Then Northern New South Wales, Maitland, pretty decent race actually in Northern New South Wales, only 3 points separating the top four. Maitland first with 36, Broadmeadow Magic on 35, the Jaffers, Lambton Jaffers on 33, and then Charlestown Azuri with their famous prizes for their raffles and whatnot, and their former employers of Lubo Milosevic, they're fourth on 33 points. NPL Tasmania, Devonport City doing an easy 10 points clear of South Hobart. But now, I should have really done the BBC voice for that, shouldn't I?
I was going to say, I thought the BBC have recently discontinued the results reading.
Well, there we go.
To public outcry, if I understand.
Well, so what could it be? It should be Sydney United 1, Western United 1, Sydney United penalty shootout 4, Western United 3. But moving on,
we'll do the shipping forecast as an encore for today's podcast.
All right, moving on. All right, now we can get into Victorian Nuffery, and I'm going to start it off because I was on the call of the most important game for this weekend, South Melbourne beating Dandenong City, and that meant that, well, other results combined meant that Dandenong City Hajduk will be going down, joining Eastern Lions in being relegated to NPL 2. Sad face, really good facility, really nice people down at Dandenong City. Alas, first half of the season absolutely killed them. as was pointed out by my co-commentator Demir Kulash. Steven Topalovic's absence throughout the first half of the season. Couldn't find anybody to consistently score. Nicky Kalmar ended up, well, there's one game to go, but Nicky Kalmar, their top scorer, he pretty much scored every single goal via a set piece. Sort of tells you how their season's gone. But meanwhile, South Melbourne Hellas, premiers of Victorian football for the first time since 2015, had a big old celebration. Lost Harrison Sawyer to the Indian Super League during their week off, wondering to see how they would go. Didn't actually change a lot in approach, but they were still able to get the job done, albeit against relegated Dundee City. And all of a sudden, they have a rather, well, it looks like a much bigger task now, albeit they've got nothing to play for. But Avondale next week, and Josh Parrish, you were at Avondale, Heidelberg. We were all writing Avondale off. We were thinking maybe they're going to focus on the Australia Cup. They've lost the 2021 Premiership, that they are the unlosable Premiership, but they've come out and stunned Heidelberg United today, haven't they?
Yeah, it was bonkers. 4-1. I don't think anyone saw that coming. And honestly, if Avondale had been a little bit more clinical in the second half with some of the counter-attacking opportunities they had, it could have been 6, 7, 8. Like, there was just massive gaps at the back for Heidelberg. First half was really fascinating because Heidelberg had quite a lot of the ball and a lot of set-piece opportunities, but Avondale on the break was just cutting through them so easily. Great counter-attacking moves. They made a kind of tactical tweak to move Mr. FFA Cup. I don't know if he's Mr. Australia Cup now, but Liam Boland back into a kind of playmaking number 10 role, and they put Yusuf Ahmed up top, who's had a really disappointing season, but he managed to score his second goal of the year to open the scoring. And Christian Trajewski just pulled the strings in midfield, was superb, scored twice, got an assist. It was just, unplayable and looking in top form. But yeah, they went with, lots of speed, lots of dribbling up top, and players who can thread the needle through midfield and play very nice balls over the top of the defence. So that's a good formula if you're going to be taking on an A-League side midweek. So, watch this space. I mean, Avondale have had all sorts of injuries this season. They've really struggled to have a consistent lineup, particularly in defence, and that continued today. They lost Stefan Zinni in the warm-up, so he's out for Wednesday. I'm not sure who's going to play centre-back on Wednesday because one of their defenders has suffered a family bereavement, so best wishes to him. But I think they've got, I guess, a formula for success there with Stefan Valentini coming back into the team's first start in a couple of months for him. So it's just whether they pull up okay from this match and this, clinical performance that they had in the first half. It just really put Heidelberg to the sword. They have these sort of 20, 30-minute bursts of absolutely unbelievable football, Avondale. And if they can put one of those together against Brisbane Roar and defend well enough to keep them out at the other end, because Heidelberg had their chances, especially off set pieces, they're a chance. They're a chance, and they've got their finals destiny in their own hands.
Well, we'll get to your game, Nick DeBano, as well in the NPL 2 promotion race, but staying with the top flight for now, it like not just being a victory enough here, it really is set up for a really interesting final day of the season with some, pretty big name clubs, either for their historical accomplishments and NRI or Australia Cup notoriety. But heading into the final day of the season, there are 4 sides competing for 3 final places in the playoffs. Also intriguing today, Oakley's 2-1 loss to St Albans combined with Port Melbourne's 1-0 win over the Bentley Greens means that Port Melbourne are now second on the table, which comes with it a week off. And generally, I was speaking to people at South Melbourne yesterday, and they were consistently telling me the side that scares them most heading into finals is Port Melbourne. And I absolutely agree with them. That Port Melbourne side, they've got the second best defence in the competition after South Melbourne. They've been getting better throughout the season, I reckon, as well. Coach Adam Piddick, formerly of Queensland, really good gaffer, it's seemingly, for this level at the very least. He's got them playing quite well. They don't have any massive names, any massive former A-League men playing names, but they play well as a team. They can really get the job done. Chris Duggan up front, Jackson Courtney Perkins, they can play well. But looking at so we've got Green Gully. Mathematically, Green Gully can still fall out of the finals places, although goal
they're
difference.
They're not going to lose against Eastern Lions.
Yeah.
Let's be real. They're going to at least get a point.
They're not going to lose against Eastern Lions, and their goal difference is sufficient to ensure that they'll play finals. It's more seeding. But final round of the campaign, Avondale enter in 5th on 40 points. Bentley enter in 6th, the final playoff place, on 39 points. On goal difference, Heidelberg enter in 7th on 39 points. Dandenong Thunder really ruined it for themselves by losing 2-1 to Hume, because if they'd got a win as well, they'd be entering on 38 points, but sucks to be the Thunder. It's really set up for a barnstorming final day of the season. You've got Avondale will be facing South Melbourne, premiers, top of the table, but nothing to play for. Bentley Greens facing already relegated Dandenong City. And then Heidelberg have Eastern Lions. Green Gully have Dandenong Thunder, Nick DeBarno. So it's Heidelberg and Bentley Greens with the easiest fixture. Avondale playing a South with nobody to lose. Intriguing.
All I'm saying is, if Dandenong Thunder had won yesterday, Joey, it would have had not only the reverberation in terms of all the other permutations would have been massive, because the relegation race would have been still alive. And you got Dandy City, taking on as you mentioned, Bentley Greens, and Oakley taking on Hume, who Oakley is well playing for top 2. There's so much on the line in almost every single game, so you barely even have a dead rubber next weekend, which would have been massive. But Mark Otching had other thoughts to decide to score an absolute worldie and keep Hume City in the top tier for
in Urson Gullam's first game.
Game in charge. Yes, but it's going to be great. I mean, there's actually a situation where I could see all 5 teams ranked 5 to 7 all winning. But it could just be a situation of, Heidelberg just being unlucky to miss out. I mean, this is where their poor start to the season might actually come back to bite them. The fact that they started so poorly and they've had to play a bit of catch up. I know they got into the top 6 and, Avondale fell back out. But it almost is with Avondale, just like they've gotten everyone back at the right stage and now the cream's starting to rise to the crop at the top. And it depends what happens with if South Melbourne. I mean, I don't think South Melbourne are going to, lie down for them, because I think that there's a little bit of something of beating Avondale and making sure that they could maybe have a say in Avondale missing the finals. So I think that will be probably the game of the weekend to keep an eye on. But I am just very intrigued to see how it all plays out. And the one thing I love about what they're doing this weekend, concurrent kickoffs. This is something we need everywhere. This is something we should be having in everything, especially we talk about the A-League men's. This is the great sort of example of it. You have all this stuff on the line. You have stakes. You have it's going to be bonkers. Once it gets to sort of that last half an hour, last 20 minutes, it's 4:45 on next Sunday, and you've got so much on the line, so much going on. It's going to be so much fun.
Well, when are we getting NPL Red Zone, Goal Rush final day? That would be the best. That would be the best 2 hours.
To be fair, you got that on radio when Jordan Canellis and I did the final game in 2017, and we were using.
You sent me to Knight Stadium for that one. I think that was your Knight Stadium.
We were using Skype, and then I would make the phone call, and then just bring the fader up, and you're live to air, pal. But I mean, this is the sort of cowboy stuff we used to do in the radio days. So,
Teo, you're telling me FNR's Matchday Live in 2018 was the secondary version of FV's original 2017 idea,
mate. So I mean, 2014 FFA Cup. I remember doing a pre-game show where we got 3 guests on from the other 3 grounds. Like James Gardner was doing the Broadmeadow Magic game in Newcastle. I think we got. What's his name? Andrew Prentice from the Manly Daily to come on from their game. And Donald Sutherland, who was the Melbourne Knights media manager at the time, we got him to come on from Brisbane. And again, this is just, for who was listening other than me and the other guys on air. But, this was the dedication. Sorry to go down the path of old war stories, but I mean, this is the stuff we used to do before, thankfully, streaming technology got a bit more cheaper and accessible and meant that we could leave the radio days behind.
But how did it affect your batting average, Teo? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, no, good point.
Well, Teo, on the subject of, because Nick Dabano did talk about the cream of the crop, but the scope for me doing a Randy Savage impression has long since passed. But Teo, when was the last time Heidelberg missed finals?
I'm guessing it might have been the year they got promoted back into the NPL, the year it started, 2014.
So it's been a while.
Oh, hang on. Or maybe even they made finals that year. I'm starting to think that it may actually have been the year that they were in the second tier, winning promotion back to the top flight. Apologies if I've got this wrong. I'm going purely off the top of my head here.
But it's been a while.
I've got Tony Pasolia's season guide up in front of me, just as you mentioned it. Thank God I had it bookmarked. They have never missed it in the NPL era, so we have to go back to the VPL days. So maybe get onto the Oz Soccer database as well, curated by Tony Pasolia.
That first year of NPL, Nick, was their first year back in the top flight after winning the second tier.
So it would be 2013 then. Would be the
and that's because they weren't even in the division. Yeah.
So 9 years, pretty crazy stuff.
All right, very quickly before we get on to National Second Division chat, Nick Dabano, 60 seconds, NPL 2. What's happening?
Mate, you told me 60 seconds, Joe. You know it's not going to be 60 seconds.
It's 55 now.
Friday
Moreland
night
City
was,
had already scored by this point. Nick, come on. Pick up
they
pace.
actually had. So I did the game on Friday night, Pascoe Vale versus Moreland City at CB Smith Reserve. Moreland City obviously winning in the Joey, can you please just stop? In terms of you're putting me off here, man. Like in terms of the actual game,
I'm holding a stopwatch up to the screen just to on to 16 seconds.
I'm going on to a different tab. Anyways, Moreland City, they got the job done over Pascoe Vale. It was essentially, for Pascoe Vale, they had to win or get a point to stay in the promotion hunt. Or Moreland City win, they get one step closer to promotion. Moreland City, as just mentioned, scored within just the first 15 seconds. For one name to keep an eye on if they do get promoted or even if they don't. Fletcher Fulton, sensational player, sensational season coming across from Tassie. Terence Carter equalised for Paco. It looked like it was going to, end as a draw. It was going end to end. Paco were down to 10 players after they got a red card, and they were actually looking like the more likely to score. And then just the most crazy finish ensued. And Apaya Kuno, who has been at Moreland City for so long now, was part of that team that, infamously lost the promotion relegation playoff. He's been a goal machine at NPL 2 level this season. He's had a lot of injuries. He's only scored the one goal. Got in the right place at the right time to tap home the winner. And there were just scenes of delirium. I mean, it was a really good turnout. From what I understand, it was close to 1,000 people, if not more, at CB Smith Reserve. And, it was a Pascoe Vale home game. But there were so many Moreland City fans as well, riding every challenge, riding every bump. It was a lot of fun. And, to see obviously Pascoe Vale, the juniors come out, I was talking to their club president, Lou Toner, afterwards, who obviously was really upset about the result, but said, football's the big winner, because having moments like this and days like this where the whole club's involved, from juniors all the way through to seniors, everyone's riding every challenge, every bump. And I was even saying it to my co-commentator, Craig Filer, on the night, this is what we love so much about football, is that when we get these games where there's stakes, there's promotion on the line, we'll get into National Second Division in just a second, there is so much just riding on every moment of that game. And you could feel the tension. You could cut it with a knife. And at the end of the day, Moreland City now on the precipice of promotion. They haven't been promoted they haven't been the top tier in 75 years. And they've never actually been in it under the Moreland City moniker. They've been so close. They have to beat North Geelong next week, or hope that Brunswick Juventus don't win. North Geelong obviously already promoted to the top tier after beating Ballon yesterday. So a lot on the line. If you tell certain Moreland City people that they're basically up, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear the reverse of Oz right now. They are so paranoid about, the seasons past and, how they've come so close but not been able to scrape over the line. Which, to be honest, I don't blame them for feeling a bit nervous about next Saturday. Joey, I'm sorry. This is like a third of your soliloquies on a weekly.
I'm cutting you off in 10 seconds.
No. Joey, stop. I was just going to say, if there's another game to keep an eye on, obviously the top tier, that's all on Sunday. The second and third tier with NPL 2 and NPL 3 is all Saturday at 3 o'clock. So keep an eye on that as well if you want to.
There we go.
I just want to say, good luck to not my uncle, Gianfranco Impellizzeri, and Brunswick Juventus.
Okay. So barnstorming final day of the season coming up in NPL Victoria and NPL 2, but moving away from our Vic Nuffrey onto the second division. And, well, we'll get to the first thing first. Rumours abound that basically the rumour is that if I read the tweet right from, I think it was, properly credit them, I think it was Aussie Scout on Twitter saying...
Scout_Aussie if you want to read it for yourself.
Saying that FA had presented clubs with a requirement, a $750,000 license fee to compete in the national second division, and reported that all but one club had just walked away upon being told that figure, which doesn't mesh with some of the stuff we've heard, Josh.
No, and I think people need to get like a little bit less. People need to stop tearing their hair out over what anonymous Twitter accounts say. That's what it makes it sound as if all these clubs have walked away from the negotiating table because it's hard to get this across in a tweet. I understand, because the price is too high, and it's just not what's happening. Like, these discussions are ongoing. Football Australia's had their own costings. Obviously, AAFC have different estimates, and there will probably be a consensus reached at some point. But, it's going to be too expensive for some clubs, and maybe the Football Australia is going with the kind of worst case scenario costing in order to, I guess, weed out the clubs that aren't serious about it. I would understand if they would do it that way.
Here's my question, though. License fees are really convenient catch-all. And when I was working at Football Victoria, I used to argue with the former CFO about this all the time, that from a PR point of view, I think at the time the license fee per year was $40,000. And I said, why can't we just itemize all the things the license fee actually gets you and then send it in an itemized bill and not use a catch-all name, which allows the clubs to complain at a PR level about the license fee? Because the assumption of the clubs, rightly or wrongly, is that the entire sum of the license fee wasn't paying for their administrators and the wages of the people that work out of FFV's head office. It was just going straight into the bank to be used for whatever purpose Football Victoria saw fit. Now, I wanted to end that misconception, and I wanted to engage in some constructive PR to try and shift the discussion. Didn't win that little tug of war, but so be it. So my question is, what does the license fee actually get you? If that's inclusive of all transportation and accommodation, doesn't that cost start to make sense? I feel as though a term like license fee is just a really easy word. It's like shouting, not quite fire in a crowded theatre, but a word close to fire. Like, gee, it's warm. And then all of a sudden, people start
I smell gas.
People start to, what is this, Inglourious Bastards? People start to panic. And spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't taken the 13 years to watch that movie. But I feel as though it's, yes, you can put that out on Twitter. And look, I don't know who Aussie Scout is. Maybe some people do. Maybe it should be obvious and I just haven't been paying attention. But, let's actually work out what it pays for, because, Joey, you made an excellent point on this a couple of weeks ago. The AAFC are a lobbying group that represents clubs. They are not the administration of the National Second Division. We don't know who the commissioner of the league is. Are they going to have a CEO? Who are their football operations staff? Who runs the fixturing? How does dispute resolution work? Because believe me, there will be disputes. How does GDT, tribunal work? All of these things, all of this framework. Right now, our focus has almost exclusively been on which clubs are in. But there's all that apparatus that has to be paid for somehow. And I would like to know, when a word like license fee is thrown out there, exactly how much and what apparatus it is paying for.
I mean, we don't even know, the structure that clubs themselves will take to enter this thing. I remember speaking to somebody that suggested that, somebody give me a hypothetical club, not Victorian.
Sydney Olympic.
Somebody suggested, maybe Sydney Olympic want to enter the National Second Division. Sydney Olympic in its current form don't actually enter the National Second Division. Sydney Olympic set up an affiliate company that gets the National Second Division license. Sydney Olympic owns 51% of it, and they sell 49% of it to private investment to raise the money. Floated that as a potential option that not only would help them raise funds, but would also inoculate actual Sydney Olympic if something went wrong and it failed. It wasn't the entire club that was failing. It was just the national second division entity which they own. So, like, we don't even know.
Is this the National Shell Company division? Is it?
But that's the point. We don't even know the models that the entrance clubs themselves will be operating. I mean, I think it's far too early to say that negotiations have collapsed because clubs have walked away from the table over a license fee. I mean, I've only heard of one club in Victoria making a show of walking away from the table, and I don't think anybody actually expected them to enter the national second division anyway, which sort of shows you how widespread the conversations have been that, you know, these clubs that nobody actually expected to be in the national second division are at the table anyway. So I wouldn't panic yet. Of course, I mean, when we start to get a lot more concrete stuff coming out, and if it suddenly seems like Football Australia are letting perfect be the enemy of good, something like that, that's when you start to ask a few more questions. But right now, I don't agree with Josh. Anonymous accounts can be right. This anonymous account has been right on a few things, but I wouldn't allow one tweet from one anonymous account to suddenly blow up the national second division. I think, Josh, did you have something else to add?
Yeah, I just dislike how this starts all this stuff about, you know, kind of A-League versus NPL, and I just hate it. You know, and we're so conditioned by the idea of an A-League club buying their way in and paying for a license and comparing this hypothetical license fee, whatever that means. As you point out, Teo, we don't even know what that means. Maybe that's all inclusive of all of their expenses, you know, versus, you know, whatever Western United paid to get in the A-League. And it's a totally different thing because
it's irrelevant.
An A-League license at the moment in the current system inoculates you from relegation and keeps you in the league, and it's a totally different value proposition to potential national second division that could have promotion relegation either to the NPLs from day one or a couple of years down the line. It might not even be a league; it might be a Champions League format. So, you know, why would you be paying for the privilege of owning a spot in a off-season tournament, essentially?
Well, paying for the privilege of basically an expanded NPL national finals, which,
if it's a Champions League model, which is stupid.
Which is a competition that has not and did not ever move the meter. So
exactly. And it was dead for 2 years, and nobody seemed to notice until this year.
So we don't know what the license fee is for, and we don't know what kind of value it has to hold, which means that talking about figures and so forth is pretty irrelevant because so many of the details are unclear, and it's so different clearly to the A-League. So it's pointless to compare it to the A-League at this point.
And I mean, call me a dreamer if you like, but just looking at this from Football Australia's standpoint, you know, Football Australia have talked a lot about bringing in a national second division. From a PR perspective, they kind of really need to do it because, I mean, you look at their policy priorities right now. Yes, the Women's World Cup is on the way, but, you know, they've also promised a domestic transfer system, which that really seems to be getting bogged down and amongst wars between various stakeholders. If all of a sudden we're not getting a domestic transfer system, we're not getting a national second division, it's really starting to look bad for Football Australia and on actually delivering some steak to go with their sizzle. I mean, yes, even the Women's World Cup is on its way, but there's still going to be a lot of questions about legacy and the like for that, and not just legacy for the top end of town, but as we were talking about when Taryn was on the show, NPLWs, community clubs, as I pointed out on a previous episode of TNC, educating and making it affordable for people to coach this anticipated massive amount of new participants that we've gotten. So from a Football Australia perspective, I don't think they can, well, they probably can afford it in the grand scheme of things because not delivering on things is what Australian football does, but it's a really bad look for Football Australia and James Johnson and newly introduced Ernie Merrick, who, as was discussed in his interview, one of his responsibilities apparently is seeing the introduction of the National Second Division. So it's a really bad look for them if they allow this to get derailed, you know, because they couldn't negotiate properly with participant clubs.
And that's not the feedback that I've got.
Yeah.
It's not the mail that I've got. The mail I've got is the clubs have been quite pleased with the amount of detail that Football Australia's gone into. I just don't have that detail to hand. There's so many things that are unclear, what clubs are going to be in it, what the competition's going to look like, how it's administered. But I think what we do know is that it's going to happen in some way, shape or form. I'm very confident about that it's going to start if they decide to do a summer comp in late 2023 or if they decide to do it as a winter comp in early 2024. That's as much as I am confident about. The form it takes, no idea, but I know it'll happen in some way, shape or form.
Before we move on, I did float this before, Teo, and forgive me if we've actually covered this in a previous episode of TNC. Tell me if we have, but Manly United, what's the deal? Like, they seem to be a very well-run club. They seem to be successful. They've gone on a few Australia Cup runs. You know, they've beaten Sydney Olympic in a penalty shootout this weekend. They're in the finals. What's the deal with Manly United? They're not a historical club. No, it's a legit, like, are they a potential national second division side? Is somebody based up there in Sydney? What's the go?
Well, here's the thing. When we discussed this the week before last in person, this chat, the TNC live will be selling out venues just like Football Weekly before too long. But my theory is that Brisbane and Queensland has the players, Sydney, New South Wales has the stadiums, and Victoria has the money and the ambition. But not enough have all three. That's the problem.
Who's got the ticker?
Victoria uses their money and ambition to recruit all the players from Queensland, but they play in parks, whereas you've got New South Wales where the crowds are waning. Example today being a bumper crowd as opposed to what Sydney United would get week to week. But they play out of perfectly built, perfectly sized stadiums for this stuff. So Manly United have fed so many players into Sydney FC's youth team, both boys and girls, that when they play each other, the Manly fans joke that it's Sydney FC's feeder team versus Sydney FC. And it's so rare to see a club that has made peace with the idea of, dare I use the word, subservient to the A-League system. And when Taryn was on, we were talking about how everything from North Sydney up is starting to become a real hotbed of player production in New South Wales. That I just found it confounding because Manly at home, maybe not away, but at home, they draw great crowds for both their men and women. I think they would probably draw the highest NPL women's crowd home game to home game of any team in the country. If I'm mistaken in this, by all means, let me know. I think that their men's team, again, while not blazing, is very high performing. I mean, they're in the grand final and they only missed out on the league on goal difference. They have a bit of a unique identity. They are the one team from their patch, and they have a geographic catchment area that actually suits them down to a T. And they've got a decent stadium, albeit synthetic, but it's hosted the Parochial, it's hosted A-League Women's, and they've only just relayed the synthetic on the main pitch. The question is, and they've got Dave Mason, former FFA man in charge, as the CEO of the local association, which is massive because they've got a local association providing lots and lots of players into that Manly United youth teams at the NPL level, boys and girls. My question is, do they have the raw ambition? Do they want to be beating and playing against Sydney FC by winning promotion up the grades at some point into the future? And it is kind of frustrating to see a club that actually has all the pieces. They have the players, they have the financial backing, they have the stadium, but they don't have the ambition. And that raw, naked ambition is the one thing that drives clubs to want to be in a national second division. So I'm throwing that out there. I look forward to the discussion continuing because I do not have or profess to know the answer to my very long-winded question.
I could probably
Speaking
Wikipedia
of naked
this,
ambition, I think we've got some naked ambition in the spam bots in the YouTube comments.
Oh yeah,
everyone has access. But
we can't delete them because that ruins everything. But nobody.
I think this is because I mentioned the Altona nude beach earlier. So sorry. I think that's my fault that these balls started appearing.
Teo, though, is the reason they have such institutional support and backing is that because they don't seek to threaten the A-League? Or is that a problematic question to ask?
Well, I don't know, but it's just so rare to see a club that's got its NPL women's. I haven't seen their result today because I was calling, but they're on the verge of making the top four. Their men are in the grand final. It would stand to reason that they could quite seamlessly enter both the national second division for men and women and do a very good job. The question is, do they want to, or do they know that they've reached a ceiling?
I could probably Wikipedia this, Taylor, but I'll just ask you instead. Do they have a migrant background, or is this like a dinky-die Aussie club?
I would not know for sure, but I'm pretty sure they are an organic result of a merger, but potentially that's why they are united. But again, my knowledge of the history is certainly not at Tony Pasolio levels.
Well, I'm going to move the conversation along now because the way we're currently going, we actually are going to hit 3 hours. We've been talking about Sydney FC, so I'm actually going to focus on the actual Sydney FC, not the feeder team, because they have made, much to the pleasure of their fans that were asking where the signings are, they've made a few this week, especially Robert Mack, 73-time Slovakian international signing on. Then they brought on the Alex Parsons project down from Brisbane, and then the announcement, the superstar, the red and black legends, Western Sydney Wanderers icon, if you read Keep Up, Jack Rodwell signing with Sydney FC in the past few days. What do we make of Sydney FC's movements, Nick DeBarno?
I mean, Jack
he's on his
Rodwell.
phone, but I'm not going to make the joke because
no. My phone's over here, mate. Like it's not in my hand. So no.
Show us your most recent app open.
I'll show you. No, anyways, Jack Rodwell.
He was googling Altona nudist beach.
I'm sorry, Nick.
Sorry about the cyberbullying. Nick
We
Stoll's not
need
even
to
on.
have a chat in our post-production meeting. Jack Rodwell. I mean, it's an interesting signing. I mean, it's not as like there's this whole thing about, oh, look at this crossing enemy lines. Rodwell, the Judas. I mean, how many games did he play for Western Sydney? Like, a genuine question. 14.
Yeah,
14 games. This isn't Ninkovic levels, fellas. Like, stop trying to this isn't drumming up. It feels like we're just trying to drum up a picket and go like, oh, he's a player who's crossed enemy lines. It doesn't happen often when there are so many players throughout time who have done it. They've gone from Sydney to Western Sydney.
Zach Sapsford crossed from the two NPL teams mid-season.
I know. Like, this is the thing. I mean, if you want to talk about rivalries, mate.
Jelly snakes thrown at him by the Wanderers fans.
I mean, if we're going to talk about rivalries, Peter Sawan signed for Brunswick Juventus from Ballon. That's travesty down here at NPL 2 for the Italian derby. Like, come on. Anyways, in terms of Jack Rodwell, look, I think in terms of an actual signing, I mean, they don't really need another 6, so I could probably see him playing as a centre-back. They do need a centre-back. So for that point of view, sure, if he can stay fit, same sort of thing we spoke about last year, he could be an okay signing for them. Alex Parsons, I mean, he showed a bit a couple seasons ago for Brisbane. Everyone was fawning over him because he had a good little patch off the bench. And, as Joey, as you mentioned, the Alex Parsons project became this little thing for a while. But it's good to see that hopefully he gets some minutes and kick on. Well, Robert Mack, I mean, to be honest, got a decent resume. He's got a decent goal at the Euros. I think it's not a bad signing. I want to see him get there, him and Josh's boy, Joe Lolly. And that, I think, then I'll start to see a bit of a decent team being formed. But I don't mind the Robert Mack signing in particular. I think that's the one that's kind of the sleeper. I wouldn't say foreign, like marquee sign, but sort of the sleeper foreign sign I think could actually work well for them.
Sorry, my mic was off. We've got a question coming in from Blake Hampton 11. Rumored target Joe Lolly. Josh, I know you're a huge fan of Joe Lolly. You like his story, but Blake Hampton 11 on the YouTube's asking us the question: is Lolly meant to be a sugar hit?
I think he's just doing a pun, Joey. I don't.
Oh, fuck.
I don't think
Got him!
Question.
Oh, there he is. Out he goes. Yeah.
Joey has been hard-boiled by that one.
Oh,
he's off. He's gone. He's gone. Hour 2, minute 8. Joey Lidge drops off the podcast.
Gone.
Oh dear. To answer the question seriously, no, he's not a marquee name.
If he
but
is, we've got a bloody problem.
Exactly. He's not. He's not Nanny. He's not. He's obviously not that. But he's a guy who peaked in the championship. But that's potentially a good player at A-League level, a very, very good player, and he can make himself into a household name from his performances here. So, and he's a fan favorite pretty much wherever he's been, injury problems permitting. He can do spectacular things on the pitch, and a lot of Forest fans were really upset that he didn't stay with the team and get his crack at the Premier League. So, I think it's a coup if assuming that they wrap that one up. Shout out to Jonathan Howcroft.
Teo, any comments on Sydney FC's recruitment or the Sydney Derby before we move on?
No, I touched on the youth players during the Australia Cup chat, so nothing to add.
Well, we'll quickly go through the overseas Aussie watch. So, unfortunately, one of the bolters, J. Rich Begaloo, is now out for the season after suffering an injury. Also, looking at our Caledonian outpost, not the best European debut for Mark Berigidi and Aziz Bayic. Well, away European debut, at least. Shipping 7 goals against AZ Alkmaar. Poor old Biras was getting roasted even by Scottish politicians in the aftermath. I mean, has anybody else actually watched the highlights of those goals? I mean, he was at fault for how many do we think of the 7? Maybe 2, maybe 3? Two. But when you're losing 7-1, your goalkeeper generally isn't the problem, is it?
I mean, no. I'm worried for Bayic because the manager gave him a massive rap, saying, we're sweating on his work permit. We need him to come in. We know he's a top professional. He'll be ready to go straight away. And 50 minutes later, he's subbed off with his team 6-0 down. So hopefully it's just a baptism of fire. I mean, your mind can't help but go to Michael Theo's experience at Norwich when something like this happens. I hope sincerely that these two get their opportunity to bounce back.
We've got a comment coming in from Lockie Flanagan, HEA. I'm not sure why he's putting heat in the comments, or Heather, perhaps. RTS, I see. What does that spell?
Just a quick one. I mean, I do feel for Biras because, as you mentioned, unfortunately, some people would look at it through there'd be some people out there that would go, the scapegoat because he's the goalkeeper. And if, some people can say, it automatically is the goalkeeper's fault. So I hope that Jack Ross does back him in. For Aziz Bayic, though, Teo, you hit the nail on the head. I do have concerns if hopefully, he can put this behind him and, this doesn't say cast him, into the wilderness from here. And, he doesn't see many minutes from now on in. But in terms of some of the other Aussies, Joey, you mentioned about J. Rich Begaloo. I think that's a hammer blow to our centre-back stocks as well, because he was going to play week in and week out in League One for Accrington Stanley. And the fact that now he's out for the season is just really, really frustrating. And it's frustrating not only for him, but also for our stocks that we have quite a hammer blow in terms of our, the depth going forward in case we do have some players that, don't pull up in
time. A blow to our centre-back stocks or a blow to our...
Or striker stocks as well. I mean, him and Marko Jankovic... Maybe Marko Jankovic is his replacement, the Swiss Army knife centre-back striker. So
what's Jamie Harnwell up to these days?
Yeah. Can we cap Aaron Amadi Holloway while we're at it as well? But yeah, so disappointing for Jay Rich. Hopefully he can bounce back, and this is just a minor hiccup in a long and good career for him as well.
Well, on the subject of goalkeepers, we have Australia's number 1 on the move, Matty Ryan, leaving not exactly productive period in La Liga, we'd call it, and signing with Danish side FC Copenhagen. Looks like with their current number 1 injured, he's going to start before the World Cup. Has to be a good move. I can't see any downsides to that.
I think it's fine.
Yeah, he needs to get football somewhere. Yes, the short loan stint with Arsenal was good, but it didn't seem to do his long-term career prospects much. And he wasn't starting at La Real, so Trabzonspor is their Champions League opponent in the playoff. That looks like a very tough game, if I'm honest. I would expect the Turkish champions to win that one. But if Copenhagen get into the Champions League, it could be a masterstroke. It could be a fantastic move for him. It's slightly concerning that so many of our players are kind of moving down in the ranking of the European leagues, but Copenhagen is a big club. So, I don't hate it, especially when he just needs football in the lead up to the World Cup.
Interesting. All right. I was looking for an article to reference, but it appears to have disappeared. I can't find it. Well, no. Hold on.
Talking about potential Aussies going overseas, talking about Aussie Scouts tweets today. Mentioned about Jake Brimmer being on Hibbs's radar and obviously declining. Well, rumored to have declined the move due to personal reasons. Found that quite an interesting little tidbit that he's getting some interest from overseas. But yeah, I think. Look, I don't want to go into the personal reasons, but obviously I thought that was an interesting bit of news to come out. And also Ben Garuccio getting some interest from the Eredivisie, but I hope they didn't watch the penalty shootout because and hopefully he's not on the if they do sign him on natural footballing ability, I think definitely they should look at that, but maybe just don't get him as your designated penalty taker this season.
I found the article now. Dave Lewis writing in beIN Sport. It's nominally an article about Aiden Thrustic potentially being on the move, which we've already discussed. But then at the bottom he drops in, I'm not sure if this is padding or it's legit, but there have been suggestions that the mercurial Rogic might simply slip quietly into retirement after his 9-year stay at Celtic. I haven't seen much reaction to this on the soccer Twitters. I'm not sure if that's because it's beIN Sport and that doesn't really penetrate the zeitgeist, but Rogic retirement, would that surprise immediate reactions having sprung that on you?
Yeah, until we get the tell-all at a later date, no doubt. It could be months, years, or never. I hope he doesn't become Peter Wilson 2.0 and just disappears from football altogether and remain a mystery. But I also think it's hit home to understand not to press any further on this one. We've got to wait for him to come back out if he wants to.
Yeah,
cool.
100%. Yeah, clearly if these sorts of rumours are being bandied about, there's something going on. But we have no way of knowing what that is, and it seems to be a personal thing with Rogic. And I just hope he's all right. That's sort of where my head's at on this. I don't anticipate a move impending anytime soon, and I'm not impatient to see him play in the A-League or anything. I just hope the guy's all right.
Pretty much that. Same thing as Ulysses Davia. Just leave them alone. Let them sort it out. When they're ready to talk, they'll talk. When they're ready to play, they'll play. When they're ready to sign, they'll sign. Awesome. Well, our next advertised segments, we were going to talk about Adam Goods joining the Indigenous advisory committee. We were going to do hot takes, but both of those required Vince Notika Regari fulfilling his stated commitment and coming on the show, which he has turned down. So feel free, if you are still watching after 2 hours and 17 minutes, to let him know how disappointed you are in his lack of ticker not coming on the show. But I think basically without that, Vince Regari, I think we're pretty much done, lads. Did anybody have any parting thoughts that they wanted to add?
I have one line on the Adam Goods, Adam Goods thing. I think it's
we were going to discuss. Yeah.
Because he is someone who has lived experience of deciding not to play football when it was his true love as an Indigenous Australian. And I think that's a useful perspective to have a fabulous athlete who was lost to our code. So I think that's actually genuinely useful. And he's distancing himself from Australian rules for various reasons. But if the game can benefit from his expertise, I think that's great.
Well,
hopefully,
I think it's only a net positive. And I think when you read Vince's article and you see how much he actually loves the game, there was a point where he was leaving engagements early to go watch Del Piero play. Like, I think if that kind of sums it up, and the fact that, since he's retired from playing Australian rules football, he's still playing every weekend as well, Masters football in Sydney, which I think is great to see. He's not entirely lost to the game, at least now in a different aspect. And I think it's only can be a net gain. I actually really like it. I think it's a great story that Adam Goods has a role like this in Australian football, and as well with the Indigenous Advisory Board. I think it's sensational.
Hopefully we'll be able to get Vince on at some point in the future, and we can go into this one in a little bit more detail. But before we leave, we can look at all right, Nick DeBarno, before I get to predictions for the Aussie Cup, did you have something else?
No, I was literally just going to mention, let's get to Aussie Cup on Wednesday. That's all I wanted to get to.
Yeah,
all right.
Can we talk about what we're doing yet Wednesday, fellas? Or are we saving
Let's keep it a surprise. Let's just say we're looking forward to it.
Well, hang on, I can say what I'm doing.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, speaking of great Indigenous players who have represented the Socceroos, myself and Travis Dodd will be live in person in Adelaide for the cup tie that I really flew a bit close to the wind. You can't do that with the qualifying rounds in Victoria. You can't say this is coming out of the hat and then it comes out of the hat, because they'll make you redraw. But I said it on the Victory Western game. Let's have Ernie Merrick heat up the balls and get Adelaide City versus Adelaide United. And by God, he did it. So vote one, CFO Ernie Merrick. And I am absolutely thrilled to be heading back to Adelaide for the first time since 2019 to commentate that game. And I'm not sure Travis Dodd will remember, but I met him at an Indigenous football clinic run in Shepparton back in, I believe, 2009. So I'm looking forward to seeing him for the first time in a very long time.
I'm going to go out on a limb here, Teo, and say he has no memory of that.
Well, you never know. Some people have great memories. Let's wait and see.
All right. Well, we'll get to the tips for this Wednesday, and we will start it with that one. Adelaide City, Adelaide United. Is it a showdown? Is it a derby? Have we come up with a name yet?
Well, I mean, if you saw the social media activity of Adelaide United showing all the players, both men and women, who have played for both clubs, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's kind of a friendship derby, really. I mean, the two clubs have immense mutual respect for one another. And I think when we talk about some fans who have lost perspective of just, I don't swear on air, defecating on the concept of National Second Division or being crude in their assessment of the NPL, it is heartwarming to see two clubs that are basically handshake emoji. I love it.
So if we have the showdown between the Crows and the Power, is this like the catch up or something like that?
No, it's the bro down between Adelaide City and Adelaide United.
Do you remember how Adelaide City be allowed to wear their prison bars jersey? That's what.
Great point.
Oh, Josh. I mean, Adelaide City. Yeah, I mean, is David Koch going to come down and say, "Why can Adelaide City wear the prison bars in a showdown, but we can't? This is unfair."
Nick, stop trying to make out like it's Port Adelaide being the unreasonable ones in that situation. All right,
just don't get don't open up the can of worms.
No. If it's the bro down, my question is which show tunes will be getting played over the PA? It's a very niche. Look, I think the Sydney United 58 result. You look at their form line, you look at their overall season. It gives everyone hope. Adelaide were pretty damn impressive against Newcastle in that 2-0 win, and they will have the individual talent to, in a moment of brilliance, take this game away from any given NPL team, never mind Adelaide City. But I think the crowd's going to be hot as. The crowd is going to be absolutely buzzing. I think it's going to be one of the best nights in Cup history, not just in Adelaide, but for a variety of reasons. And I'm really looking forward to it.
I mean, crowd's going to be hot as. I mean, I'm not going to be there and I'm going to be in another game, but all right.
Oh, for God's sake, mate. Just get over yourself.
The gate was open. I had to go through it. All right. Rapid fire, going round tips. Nick DeBarno, who's winning?
I'm going Adelaide United in extra time. Going to be a fun game, but Adelaide United just sneak ahead.
Josh Parrish, who's winning?
Ooh, I'm going to say Adelaide United.
Teo Pellizzeri, who's winning?
Sorry to do this, but I'm calling the game. I'm going to be impartial.
Joey Lynch, who's winning? Good question, Joey. I reckon Adelaide is going to win.
That sounds like
I'm
a lot
going
like
for-
Hang on, that's
Adelaide.
the answer, right? That's the answer I just gave you.
No,
Madonna, what are you doing?
Adelaide City 1-0, 87th minute winner.
Oh, that would be sweet.
Go on, sorry.
All right, moving on. The All A-League men matchup, Melbourne City, Wellington Phoenix. It's a rematch. It's a rematch of their meeting in last year's Australia Cup, in which the Phoenix knocked out Melbourne City on penalties. One can only hope that Scott Jamieson has been practicing his spot kicks heading into this one, given that he missed his penalty and missed a spot kick in the actual 90 minutes in that game as well. But who's winning this one, Melbourne City or Wellington Phoenix? Nick DeBarno, who's winning?
Can I go last?
Teo Pellizzari, who's winning?
Bulgaria will be the winner. Wellington to get up.
Josh Parrish, who's winning?
I'm going for the Nucks.
Joey Lynch, who's winning? City 3-1. Nick DeBarno, who's winning?
Football is winning in Casey. That's
Oh,
what's going to win.
Who's winning? Stop! Don't be a coward, Nick. Scott Jamieson is not watching 2 hours and 25 minutes into the podcast. Who's winning?
Yeah, but Joey, all it takes is for someone to screen record at the 2 hour and 25 minute mark, and he may well see it.
Hold on, I came onto a podcast late, and I had people in Football Australia taking the piss out of my ticker. Anyone could be listening at any time. I need to make sure of this. I think that honestly, if Alex Paulson plays for Wellington, Wellington wins. If Alex Paulson doesn't play,
Alex Paulson.
His name was Alex.
Genuinely, I think City wins.
God, they're afraid of a bit of banter there, Nick DeBarno. Jesus. All right, Avondale versus Brisbane Roar. The Avengers have tuned up with a big win over Heidelberg. Can they claim their first ever cup set? Teo Pellizzari, who's winning, Avondale or Brisbane?
It's Brisbane's year. I think this will be Brisbane getting a win, but something along the lines of 2-1.
Josh Parrish, who's winning?
Can't split him.
Nick DeBarno, who's winning?
If I speak. In terms of cup set, look, I actually think there's a good chance for a cup set.
Why would he make that prediction? Why would he do that?
Yeah.
Nick DeBarno, who's winning?
We have to read between the lines here, guys. I think Brisbane winning a tight one. Very, very tight. 2-1 win, but Avondale give them a real scare.
Joey, who's winning in that one? I'll say Avondale 2-1. And then the final game on the day, it's the All NPL game. The Oakley Cannons, having lost to St Albans earlier today, going up against Brisbane City. Go reverse order now. Nick DeBarno, who's winning that one?
Oh, Jesus Christ. Oakley wins.
Name's Joey,
Oakley.
but thank you.
Oh, for God's sake. Yeah, Oakley wins. We get a bit of a win for the Victorians.
Well, Lockie can't split the two. Josh Parrish, who's winning that game?
I'm going to go for a Joe Knowles winner in extra time.
Teo Pellizzari, who's winning that one?
4-4 draw, Brisbane City on penalties.
Why would he say that?
Why would I say that?
Why would he say
Why would I say that?
It sounds like you want a lot of highlights here, Teo.
I'm going to say Oakley Cannons 3-0 over Brisbane City. Ooh. I'm going to assume that the only reason they lost to St Albans today was because they had their foot off the gas pedal with one eye on this game. And that will be, so they'll be cherry ripe. For this game, yes, got the days of under 2.5 because we actually know how to have a bit of fun on this show.
This is Oz Cup. This is Oz Cup.
This is Oz Cup. You've got to root for it. Well, that's it. We've been going 2 hours and 27 minutes. Thank you to the 43 brave souls that have stuck with us throughout the entire broadcast.
Joey, no cheap plugs for yourself today, mate.
Content coming out on ESPN tomorrow. Look out for it. Anybody else have any content?
Australia Cup on Wednesday. Oh, and
on Wednesday.
If you're going to razz me for it, make sure you subscribe and rate the Gegan Pod 5 stars. Cheers.
Give us back Ante Jukic trying to force a move to the Gegan Pod.
Head over to the AFL website and go catch up on the 9 things we learned in the run home to see how the Western
No Sharon.
He's been muted. He's muted him.
You piece of.
Thanks for tuning in, one and all. Don't forget that you can subscribe, review the national curriculum wherever you get your podcasts from. We really appreciate it. Be a friend, tell a friend. But for now, that has been the national curriculum on the 14th of August, 2022. Nick DeBarno, say goodbye.
No.
Nick DeBarno hates the fans confirmed.
See you later.
Josh Parrish, say goodbye.
Bye.
Teo Palazzari, say goodbye.
Thanks and success.
Thanks and success indeed. Indeed, my name has been Joey Lynch. Teo Palazzari stole my line. Thanks and success, everybody, for tuning in. As I pad because I forgot I'm supposed to play the closing at the end of these episodes again.
Come on,
Closing.
Joey.